are certain social kinds of role, for example, which it is acceptable for men to play. There are certain roles which men ought not to play, according to definition. And you very soon are taught to accept yourself as a certain kind of a character. You are told who you are. For example, you may remember as children, you went out to play with other children, and you came home mimicking the mannerisms of some other child. And your parents being disturbed by this, because they said, that's not you, Johnny, that's Peter. Because everybody wants to identify you and tell you who you are. And this grows and grows as you go through life. More and more, people are trying to identify you. Like they say, are you a Republican or are you a Democrat? Are you a Presbyterian, Episcopalian, a Baptist, a Roman Catholic? Come on now, what are you? Give, tell us. And people, in other words, persuade you into accepting certain roles. And it's so effective, this, because you eventually come to believe in it all. The Chinese devised, however, a philosophy for those who came to this point. And it is, as I said, the counterpart of Confucianism. And it's called Taoism. This character in Chinese is pronounced Tao. T-A-O. You would think it was pronounced Tao or Tao, but we've Romanized Chinese in such a way that only those in the know can decide how it's pronounced. We should have spelled it D-O-W, you see, but it's T-A-O. And this character here means the course of nature, the way, the flow of things. And so this is the philosophy of the way of nature. Now, I must start out by saying that Tao cannot be defined. You may think it's rather strange that I'm going to talk about something concerning which nothing can really be said. The book that is basic to Taoism, called the Tao Te Ching, that is the book of the way and its power, starts out by saying, the Tao, which can be described or spoken, is not the eternal Tao. And then he goes on to write a book about it, which you may think rather illogical. But this is something very important to understand. That the Tao means that which is absolutely basic. It therefore means the basic energy of the universe. It means what you are really, your true self. But in just the same way as you can't bite your own teeth, and in just the same way that you can't look into your own eyes without using a mirror, you cannot define your real self. The hand can't catch hold of itself. The tip of the finger can't touch the tip of itself. And therefore, I'm sorry, but we cannot make an object out of what we really are. And that is why any conception of who you really are that you may entertain is wrong. So if you think of yourself as an ego, that is to say, as a separate center of consciousness and action that is somehow closed up in a bag of skin, this is a false conception. You are not that. You are pretending to be that. You are playing at that. But what you really are utterly escapes definition, and therefore comes under the category of something metaphysical, that is to say, beyond physis, beyond nature in the sense of what can be classified.
Okay, we're going to continue doing this brief reading here of the Book of Wisdom or Folly. This is on the conformity of the magician, De Conformitate Magi. See to it, therefore, O my son, that thou in thy working dost no violence to the whole will of the all, or to the will common to all those beings or bicomings that are of one general nature with thee, or to thine own particular will. For first of all, thou art necessarily moved toward the one end from thine own station, but secondly, Thou art moved toward the end, proper to thine own race, caste, family, and by virtue of thy birth. And these are, I may say it, conditions or limits of thine own individual will. Thou dost laugh? What sayest thou of the revolutionary will? Not, my son. The magus, even as the poet, is the expression of the true will of his fellows, and his success is his proof, as it is written in the book of the law. For his work is to free man from the fetters of a false or superannuated will, revealing to them in measure attuned to their present needs, their true natures. And the poets, de poetes. For this reason is the poet called an incarnation of the zeitgeist, that is, of the spirit or will of his period. So every poet is also a prophet, because when that which he saith is recognized as the expression of their own thought by men, they translate this into act, so that in the parlance of folk vulgar and ignorant, that which he foretold is come to pass. Now then, the poet is interpreter of the hieroglyphs of the hidden will of man in many a matter, some light, some deep, as it may be given unto him to do. Moreover, it is not altogether in the word of any poem, but in the quintessential flavor of the poet, that thou mayst seek this prophecy. And this is an art most necessary to every statesman, who but Shelley foretold the fall of Christianity and the organization of labor and the freedom of woman, who but Nietzsche declared the principle at the root of the world war. See thou clearly then that in these men were the keys of the dark gates of the future. Should not the kings and their ministers have taken heed thereto, fulfilling their word without conflict? And the Magi of the AA, in whom the word takes flesh, de magis ordinis AA quibus caro fit verbum. Now, O my son, the incarnation of a poet is particular and not universal. He saith indeed true things, but not the things of all truth. And that these may be said, it is necessary that one take human flesh, become a magus in our holy order. He then is called the Logos, or Logos Ionos, that is to say, the word of the eon or age, because he is verily that word, and thus may he be known, because he hath it given unto him to prepare the quintessence of the will of God, that is of man, in its fullness and wholeness, comprehending all planes, so that his law is simple and radical, penetrating all space from its single light. For though his words be many, yet is his word one, one and alone, and by this word he createth man anew, in an essential form of life, so that he is changed in his inmost knowledge of himself, and this change worketh outwards little by little unto its visible effects. 69 on the Magi of old, first of Lao Tzu. De magis temporis antiquae, imprimis de Lao Tzu. It may be unto thy profit, O my son, if I relate unto thee the secret history of those who have gone before me in this grade of magus, so far as their memory hath remained among mankind. For what would it avail thee should I recount the deeds of those whom I indeed may know, but thou not? Thou knowest well how I keep me from all taint of fable, or of any word unproven or undemonstrable. First then I speak of Lao Tzu, whose word was Tao, Hereof have I already written much unto thee, because his doctrine hath been lost or misinterpreted, and it is most needful to restore it. For this Tao is the true nature of things, being itself a way or going, that is a kinetic and not a static conception. Also he taught this way of harmony and will, which I myself have sought to show thee in this epistle. So then this Tao is truth, and the way of truth. And therefore was Lao Tse Logos of his eon, and his true word or name was Tao.
What can be described? What can be put in a box and said it's either animal, vegetable, or mineral, it's either long or short, black or white, temporal or eternal. Any category you choose to apply is inadequate to this. So do you mind if we start out with something we can't say anything about at all, but it's fundamental? You see, look, it's like, what's the color of your eyes? I don't mean the iris, I mean the lens. We say it has no color. It's transparent. But you see, the perception of all colors whatsoever and all shapes whatsoever depends on that transparent lens. So then you might ask, what is the nature of consciousness? No one can say, because it is common to all experiences. And there's no way of isolating it. What is the color of space? It's the same question. Or take when you listen to a phonograph or the radio. Everything that you hear, all the human voices, all the noises of different instruments, the drums, and anything, they're all vibrations on a diaphragm. But nowhere does the radio announce that this that you are hearing now is nothing but vibrations on a diaphragm. That is basic to everything heard, and it's taken for granted. So in exactly the same way, the Tao is the basis of everything that goes on, is taken for granted. It is as necessary to everything that happens as the diaphragm is to the news on the radio, etc. But we ignore it because it's common to everything. Every experience is the basis of it, therefore we don't notice it. You don't notice anything for which you can't see a limit. And so we can't think about it. But the point is, it's very important to understand that you are it. And if you discover that, there is a way of experiencing it, which we will go into later. You become, what shall we call it, liberated. You're no longer taken in by the game that you are playing, which is that I am this particular ego that came into this world and will eventually be swallowed up by death, and that will be that. You see through that game, and you know that is an illusion, or however a convincing one. So this is basic. Tao is the course of nature. Now, in the beginning of the second chapter of Lao Tzu's book, the first chapter starts out with the words, the Tao which can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. And I'm just taking that as a kind of a key phrase to give you the first point. Now, what's the second point? That's the beginning of the second chapter of this book, which is attributed to Lao Tzu and is supposed to have existed from at least 400 BC. When he starts out the second chapter, he says, when all the world knows beauty to be beautiful, there is already ugliness. When all the world knows goodness to be good, there is already evil. Thus, to be and not to be arise
Okay, this is on Gautama. De Gautama, whom men call Gautama, or Siddhartha, or the Buddha, was a magus of our holy order, and his words was anatta. For the root of his whole doctrine was that there is no Atman, or soul, as men ill translate it, meaning a substance incapable of change. Thus, he, like Lao Tzu, based all upon a movement instead of a fixed point, and his way of truth was analysis, made possible by great intention of the mind toward itself, and that well fortified by a certain tempered rigor of life. And he most thoroughly explored and mapped out the fastnesses of the mind, and gave the keys of its fortress into the hands and gave the keys of its fortresses into the hands of man. But of all this, the quintessence is this one word, anatta, because this is not only the foundation and the result of his whole doctrine, but the way of its work. Krishna hath names and forms innumerable, and I know not his true human birth, for his formula is of the major antiquity, but his word hath spread into many lands, and we know it today as Indra, with the secret Eo concealed therein. And the meaning of this word is the way of the working of nature.
Surely. And this is an absolutely important idea for the whole foundation of Chinese thought. The Chinese use this character to arise. It's originally the figure of a growing plant, and this one to mean mutuality. And this is completely crucial to everything I'm going to talk about. Do you see that you can't have a front without a back? That you can't have a top without a bottom? That you can't have the idea of long without the idea of short? You don't have long things before you have short things, or short things before you have long things. Same way, you don't have a world in which there are bees without flowers, or flowers without bees, because you see, bees and flowers are really the same organism. Just like they look different. Just as your head looks very different from your feet. But you don't have human beings who have heads and no feet, or feet and no heads. They go together. Now, of course, they're rather obviously joined by skin and bone. But bees and flowers float apart. Bees buzz and flowers send out smell and color. But they are the same organism because they're inseparable. They require each other. So this is the whole idea of arising together. So that, in other words, to be and not to be, the whole notion of is and isn't, depend on each other. Now, this is contrary to our common sense. We think that being is really there, and non-being isn't. But we are at the same moment afraid that being may end up as non-being. There's so much more non-being than there is being. In other words, there seems to be so much more space than there is solid. And since whatever is solid in the world requires energy, and since energy eventually runs out, we're afraid that it may all end up as nothing. That we may end up as nothing and everything else. And we are scared stiff of that. Because we don't understand that space or emptiness and solid are two aspects of one reality. Just as front and back, just as bees and flowers, they have to go together. You cannot possibly conceive a solid without a surrounding space. You cannot conceive space without solids occupying it, because space is, as a matter of fact, nothing but the relationship between solids. It's like an interval in music. You can't hear melody unless you hear intervals. But the intervals aren't there are the tones. The intervals are, in a way, an illusion. But the hearing of intervals, that is to say, the steps between tones, is absolutely necessary for being able to hear melody. If you don't hear the intervals, you only hear a succession of noises. You are then tone deaf or tune deaf. So you see how important the interval is. And any architect, any artist knows that space is real. We talk about the functions of space. Astronomers and physicists talk about properties of space, curved space, and so on and so forth. But in the ordinary common sense that most people have, they think space just isn't there. Solids are there. Reality is therefore identified with the solid, with the energy, and unreality with the emptiness. And there is this, therefore, basic dread, which existentialists talk about as angst, fundamental anxiety, that arises from the fact that the moment you know you exist, you know you could not exist. And therefore, all through one's life, there is a sort of sword of Damocles hanging over you that at any minute you might not be. Wowee, and that's a real scare. See? Until you understand that to be or not to be is not the question. Because to be cannot be without not being, just as not being cannot be without being. And so for Chinese thought, these two aspects of the world are called the yang and the yin. And they mean these two characters respectively. The yang means the south side of a mountain, which is in the sun. And the yin means the north side of a mountain, which is in the shade. And so they come to mean positive and negative, black and white, male and female. And they are represented.
Whom men call Gautama, or Siddhartha, or the Buddha, was a magus of our holy order, and his words was anatta. For the root of his whole doctrine was that there is no Atman or soul as man. De Gautama, de somne because per naturam, the deep constitutional or predisposing cause of dreams lieth within the jurisdiction of the will itself. For that will, being always present, albeit it may be latent discovereth himself when no longer inhibited by that conscious control, which is determined by environment, and therefore oft times contrary to himself. This being so, the will declareth himself as it were in a pageant, and showeth himself thus apparelled unto the sleeper, for a warning or admonition. Every dream or pageant of fancy is therefore a show of will, and will being no more prevented by environment or by consciousness, cometh as a conqueror. Yet even so he must come for the most part enthroned upon the chariot of the exciting cause of the dream, and therefore is his apparent symbolic, like a writing in cipher, or like a fable, or like a riddle in pictures, but always doth he triumph, fulfill himself therein. For the dream is a natural compensation in the inner world for any failure of achievement in the outer. De somne vestimenta horroris. Now then, if in a dream the will be always triumphant, how cometh it that a man may be ridden of the nightmare? And of this the true explanation is that in such a case the will is in danger, having been attacked and wounded or corrupted by the violence of some repression. Thus the consciousness of the will is directed to the sore spot, is in pain, and seeketh comfort in an externalization or show of that antagonism. And because the will is sacred, such dreams excite an ecstasy or frenzy of horror, fear, or disgust. Thus the true will of Oedipus was toward the bed of Jocasta, but the taboo, strong both by inheritance and by environment, was so attached to that will that his dream concerning his destiny was a dream of fear and abhorrence, his fulfillment thereof, even in ignorance, a spell to stir up all the subconscious forces of all the people about him, and his realization of the act a madness potent to drive him to self-inflicted blindness and fury-haunted exile. De somnis sequentia. Now firmly, O my son, that the true will cannot err.
represented in this familiar diagram an S-curve inside a circle, like two interlocked commas, one black, one white, and each one has, as it were, the eye of the comma or the eye of a fish or tadpole or something.
Krishna hath names and forms innumerable, and I know.
And this yang-yin symbolism is sometimes also represented, as in the Book of Changes, by broken and unbroken lines.
One's desire to join in the unfolding of a story. I want to share in the responsibility of this world, to pray for her welfare, to care for her needs. What makes people go hungry? De arte cabalistica, do thou study most constantly?
What? Come with me. Man, you're about to meet as the keys to this yard. Treat him with respect. Bottles. Jacob. Yeah, stockbroker from Pasadena. When you come to the yard, child, you take a shit, whatever. You stick to your own race. Why'd you fight that tug? Challenge me first. You gonna go around kicking it off with every buster that calls you out? I'm not looking for trouble, no. I'm not taking any shit either. The only thing we got in here is our respect. The question is what are you gonna do when you're out here slumming it with the rest of us? Because the safety of these numbers comes with a price. There are no free rides here. Everyone puts in work, whether they clicked up or not. I understand. I'm not talking about helping us with our computer skills. You'll get your fucking hands dirty like the rest of us. Or you can go back to seeing how that lone wolf shit works out for you Monday minute.
There is not people. Oh, this is pathetic. Can we move the needle? There is you know, he's different. Okay, with message from him. So
2-hour drive. But now it's
are you projecting? Wow, that was some serious projection there. Anyone else want to come up on stage and project?
No one has the capacity for this.
Back in the 40s. Okay, consider for an example the game and play of the chess, which is a pastime of man, worthy to exercise him in thought, yet by no means necessary to his life, so that he sweepeth away board in pieces, at the least summons of that which is truly dear to him. Thus unto him this game is as it were an illusion, but insofar as he entereth into the game, it bideth by the rules thereof, though they be of artifice and in no wise proper to his nature. De Gautama, whom men call Gautama, or Siddhartha, or the Buddha, was a magus of our holy order, and his words was anatta, for the root of his whole doctrine was that there is no Atman or soul as De somne because per naturam, the deep constitutional or predisposing cause of dreams lieth within jurisdiction. Clubhouse is so funny. It's so stupid. This is why I can't stop recording this, because I'm like, I hope people in the future think this is all funny if they ever watch my videos. But I know they won't, but go to RogerMayhem.com to see. The black or the brown ones, right? The paid to the one who has achieved self-mastery for one single instant is worth more than monthly offering. The Arahant, there is no burning for him who has completed. The wise if someone, the fool.
Here is the yang, here is the yin. And actually from the symbolism of the Book of Changes, which is earlier than any of the literature I'm talking about, Leibniz read it in Latin, and from it he figured out binary arithmetic, which is now basic to all computer techniques. 0 and 1. All numbers can be represented by 0 and 1. So 0 is the yin and 1 is the yang. But you see, the whole secret is that the yin and the yang are inseparable. Let's say when we were little children and everybody taught us 1, 2, 3 and ABC, they didn't teach us the lesson of black and white. This belongs, in a way, in our culture to the hushed-up side of things. Now, you see, the lesson of black and white is this. If you realize that all your senses are really one sense, a kind of touching. You touch light with your eyes. You touch air vibrations with your eardrums and get sound. Then the smell is touching gases and dust in the air. Taste is touching the texture of food and things. The touch with the epidermis is perhaps the crudest form of touch, and sight the most subtle. Then you realize that all sensation whatsoever is a vibration. It goes on and off. It's a like this, but if it goes fast enough, you don't notice the off. You only notice the on. An arc light, for example, is going on and off with terrific speed. So much so that you shouldn't use an arc light in a sawmill, because the on and off can synchronize with the speed of the saw, and a circular saw may appear to be still when it's actually moving. But all things are like that, you see. On and off. And you can't have the vibration unless it's a wave pattern. The crest of the wave is on, the trough of the wave is off. Now, you can't have a wave which is half a wave. In other words, no wave exists with a crest alone. There must be a trough. A half wave cannot be manifested. Now, if you don't understand that, if you don't realize that on, off constitutes a unity, and although they're different, they're inseparable, like the two poles of a magnet. If you don't realize that, you get scared that off may win. And if you get scared that off may win, you start another game instead of the game of black and white or on and off. The game on must win. And then the game degenerates into a fight. It becomes serious. Wowee. The awfuls might get the better in the end. They won't. They may appear to, but they won't. Being, you see, is at work, because being is constantly being non-being, being non-being. Now you see it, now you don't.
Temperance.
But if you don't see that, you see, you get mixed up. And you don't understand the relationship of yang and yin. So it is the inner connection, or rather the inseparability of yang and yin, which is what is meant by Tao. That's why Tao cannot be explained. And the reason, again, if I may put it in another way, is that all thinking is classification. It's asking, is you is or is you ain't? Is it this or is it that? Because after all, if you want to say something is inside, it requires an outside. You can't have an inside without an outside, or an outside without an inside. Which is it? You say choose. Of course, Westerners are always choosing. Once to every man and nation comes the moment to decide. In the strife twixt truth and falsehood for the good or evil side, then it is the brave man chooses while a coward stands aside. See, you must choose. Which are you? And we magnified this into a nightmare, where the ultimate consequence and destiny of the cosmos is, are you saved or are you damned? Forever. What a thrill that decision is. See? What people don't understand is that you don't know you belong to the saved group unless there's also a damned group. In every American town, there are the nice people who live on one side of the tracks and the not so nice people who live on the other. In my town, which is Sausalito, there are the people who live on the hill, and they are the nice people. And then there are the people who live on the waterfront, who are bohemians and beatniks and goodness only knows what. Well, now, when the nice people on top of the hill meet for their cocktail parties, the main thing that they discuss is how the whole town is deteriorating, and how the awful people are proliferating and fouling the bay up and so on. And they feel that this boosts their collective ego because they know they're the nice people. Meanwhile, the bohemians and beatniks get together at their parties, and they play like they're the real in-group, because all those squares and bourgeoisie who live up on the hill are engaged in a business rat race, doing work which is of no interest in order that they may buy toy rocket ships. And have wall-to-wall carpets and horribly clean houses. And may be snobbish. And so they, bohemians and beatniks, boost their collective ego. What neither side realizes is they need each other. Because you don't know who you are if you want to belong to an in-group, unless you define...
You know what's funny, Narges, is that girl Nora Bandura from the app, she told me like a couple days before she got arrested that you and I should talk and we should date.
She's like, I've known Narges longer than you, though.
She was like so insistent on that, but you know, she's projecting.
And an out-group. It is the same with philosophy. There are only two kinds of philosophy in all the history of philosophical debates. One side is called Prickles, and the other is called Who. And Prickles people are people who like things to be sharp and clear and definite. And they are the sort of people who become scholars and engineers and scientists, the type that always like clear statistics and discipline and everything well in order. And they look upon other people who they think are vague and sloppy and who are romantic and so on, and unrealistic and wishful. And they say, you're just goo. Well, the goo people turn around and say to the Prickles people, why, you're just bones. You just rattle. You've no skin on you. You know the words, yes, but you don't know the music. You have no finer feelings. And so this goes on forever. Prickles people want to believe that the ultimate constituents of the material universe are particles. Goo people prefer to think of it as waves. In classical philosophy, Prickles are nominalists, goo are realists. So it goes. They're always fighting. The thing is that they don't realize that you wouldn't know the standpoint of Prickles unless you knew goo as a contrast, and vice versa. Because the real world is gooey Prickles and prickly goo. Any way you look at it. So you see, that's just the yang and the yin. The yang is Prickles and the yin is goo. And they're inseparable, but quite different. And the thing is that to see wisdom is to understand the secret conspiracy between the opposites. That you wouldn't know one without the other. That is, it were Tweedledum and Tweedledee agreed to have a battle. That, in other words, under all explicit opposition, there is implicit unity. Only, there's no real way of saying it, and in a certain way, it should remain implicit. And in a way, off stage. Don't give the show away. So you might say to me, well, why are you talking about this? You're giving the show away, aren't you? Not really. Because not everybody will believe it. Most people won't. The opposition between life and death, between good and bad, between pleasure and pain, is extraordinarily impressive. And though one may point out that it is underneath a unity, only those with a certain innate intelligence will ever be able to believe it. So one cannot really give the show away, except, as Jesus said, to him that hath shall be given, and he who has ears to hear, let him hear. So this is the point of Taoism. In other words, the world, people involved in practical affairs, in business and family raising, are all upset because black might win. And they really are involved, and they know they have to do something to survive. Survival is the important thing. You really must go on living. But the knowledgeable people, when you get to a mature position, and everybody as they get older and has raised a family or whatever, you know, has to eventually get ready for death. Second half of life is a preparation for death. That to Western ears is a very gloomy enterprise. We pretend death doesn't happen. We sweep people under the carpet. When you're dying in hospital, everybody comes around and says, oh, you'll soon be better. And then, you know, the poor dying patient has a kind of notices there's a hollow look in their eyes, that they're just consoling. And that's terrible. When somebody is dying in hospital, you ought to come around and say, listen, you're going to die. Do you realize you're going to die? It's an occasion for an immense celebration. Because now, if you accept that you're going to die, you can let go of yourself. And you won't be a nuisance to yourself anymore. And so we should have a champagne party, or we should have sacraments, according to taste. There should be some very special, conscious entry into death of letting go of oneself. Because you only die once, and it should be a very important event. Instead of being something. Look, you morticians come around and they pretend it hasn't happened. They have all sorts of ways of glossing it over. You know that passage in Henry Miller's essay, The Staff of Life? He's talking about that dreadful food, and he says, throw anything down the hatch and swallow a dozen vitamins. If that doesn't work, see a surgeon. If that doesn't work, try a Hollywood funeral. They're the duckiest, cutest funerals in the world. You can have your beloved one propped up, smoking a cigarette, reading the Bhagavad Gita or something uplifting. Cigarette guaranteed not to rot away before the lips or the buttocks. Oh, death, where is thy sting? Oh, grave, where thy victory? Jolly, what? End of quote. You know, this is this terrible American way of death, which does not accept it, which pretends it doesn't happen, and doesn't see that death is the most life-giving thing there is.
Except the Irish.
Except the Irish, yes, they can have a wake. But even then, I don't think that in this general tradition we really get down to seeing how revivifying death is. That, in other words, if in the course of life you die, before you die physically, now that means if you accept the fact that you are completely disintegrating, and there's nothing you can do to hold on to yourself, and nothing you can do to be safe or secure, you come alive. Now everybody imagines they can be secure. You have investments, insurance, etc., 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 regular medical examination. But this doesn't make the slightest difference. Any minute you can slip on a banana peel and have an automobile accident, because The whole world is falling apart. When you were born, you were kicked off the edge of a precipice. And it's pure illusion to console yourself by clinging on hard to a rock that's falling down with you. There's no way of not disintegrating. The whole thing's falling apart. And people have been saying, ever since 6000 BC, when we've got records going back there, that the world was going to the dogs. It is. Life is something that's always falling apart. But if you get with it, in other words, you accept the situation, you flow with it, you come alive. Because you acquire courage, you're not defending yourself all the time. You acquire energy, because you're not all locked up wondering what's going to happen next. You get the capacity to take risks, and you can't have a free people unless you're willing to take risks. It's all gambling. So to know this falling apart of everything, which incidentally is what makes it alive. Change is life. This is the Tao.
Submission,
And to flow with the Tao and not fight it. You see, flow with the stream. This is the next great principle of Taoism, which is called Wu Wei. So you remember your principles. The first is Tao, which can't be defined. Second is mutual arising, the inseparability of the yang and the yin. And then we get as the next third principle, Wu. This means, in Chinese, negative, not. And Wei means interfering, catching, busyness, aggression. So the principle whereby a person may come into accord with the course of nature is by Wu Wei, not catching. It's sometimes translated not doing, but in English that is misleading. It's sometimes the right translation, but Wu Wei means...
Okay, this is Sri Krishna and Dionysus. De Sri Krishna et de Dionyso. Krishna hath names and forms innumerable, and I know not his true human birth, for his formula is of the major antiquity. But his word hath spread into many lands, and we know it today as INRI, INRI, with the secret IAO concealed therein. And the meaning of this word is the way of the working of nature in her changes. That is, it is the formula of magic whereby all things reproduce and recreate themselves. Yet this extension and specialization was rather the word of Dionysus, for the true word of Krishna was Aum, A-U-M, importing rather a statement of the truth of nature than a practical instruction in detailed operations of magic. But Dionysus, by the word I-N-R-I, laid the foundations of all science, as we say, science today, in a particular sense, that is, of causing external nature to change in harmony with our wills. And Tahuti, de Tahuti. Tahuti or Thoth confirmed the word of Dionysus by continuing it, for he showed how by the mind it was possible to direct the operations of the will. By criticism and by recorded memory, man avoideth error, and the repetition of error. But the true word of Tahuti was Amun, A-M-O-U-N, whereby he made men to understand their secret nature, that is, the unity with their true selves, or as they then phrased it, with God. And he discovered unto them the way of this attainment and its relation with the formula of INRI, I-N-R-I. Also by his mystery of number, he made plain the path for his successor to declare the nature of the whole universe in its form and in its structure, as it were an analysis thereof, doing for matter what the Buddha was decreed to do for mind. And that Egyptian magus whom the Jews call Moshe De quodam mago, Egyptorium quem appulant Jude Moishe, the follower of Tahuti was an Egyptian whose name is lost, but the Jews called him Moishe or Moses, and the fabulists made him the leader of the legendary Exodus. Yet they preserved his word, and it is IHVH, which thou must understand also as that secret word which thou hast seen and heard in thunders and lightnings in thine initiation to the degree thou wottest of. But this word is itself a plan of the fabric of the universe, and upon it hath been elaborated the holy Kabbalah, whereby we have knowledge of the natures of all things, soever upon every plane of becoming, and of their forces and tendencies and operations, with the keys to the portals. Nor did he leave any part of his work unfinished, unless it be that accomplished 300 years ago by Sir Edward Kelly, of whom also I come, as thou knowest.
Not acting against the grain of nature, acting in accordance with it. And the best possible example of Wu Wei is the art of sailing. You see, it's much more intelligent to put up a sail than to use oars, because you don't have to work so hard. So a higher form of intelligence would erect a sail. A lower form would just row. But when you sail, you cannot sail directly against the wind. If you want to sail in a direction contrary to the wind, you must tack. So in the same way, if you get caught in an overwhelming current when you're swimming, you can't turn around and swim against it. I think you'll drown in a hurry that way. But what you can do is you can swim with it and edge out. So this is the basic philosophy of what is called in Japanese Judo. Do is the Japanese way of pronouncing Dao, the gentle way. And in Judo, you overcome a violent opponent, not by direct opposition, but by using the opponent's strength to bring about his own downfall. So, you know, there's a basic kind of Judo slow motion stuff that's called Juno Kata, which exhibits the fundamental ideas of Judo. And the first lesson in Juno Kata is that there are two people, the attacker and the defender. And the attacker does this. And the defender, you see, he's coming straight at you with a blow. The defender, instead of pushing him away, does this. He, in other words, pulls the hand in the direction it's going and has the opponent off his balance. So that's the fundamental thing. Go with it. So in, say, in clever artist, he studies the grain. And he looks at the grain in a block of wood and asks, what does it want to be? There was a competition some years ago in sculpture at the Art Institute of Chicago. And it was won by a woman. The competition consisted in each contestant being given a square foot, a cube, of plaster of Paris. Do something with it. And this woman looked at it and said, it is entirely indifferent. It has no texture. It doesn't want to be anything. So she picked it up and flung it on the floor. Then it was all chipped and full of cracks, and she looked at it again. Then she decided that it wanted to be something. She saw in those cracks and chips a form. And she brought out that form and won the competition. So, great potters don't simply impose their will on the clay. They feel the texture of the clay, and they have the sense that when they throw a pot on the wheel, the pot grows of itself. And when you perfect the writing of these characters, you get the sensation that the brush is doing the work. When you skillfully make music, you feel that the music is singing through you. There was an occasion once when a great choir master in England, Sir Walter Davies, was with the former Archbishop of Canterbury, William Temple, was a great theologian. And he was training a choir of working men, factory hands or something, in singing. And he first gave them some hymn to sing that they all knew very well because they wanted to impress the Archbishop. They sang it with utmost vigor and it sounded terrible. So then he got a professional choir, which he had there, to sing the same hymn so they could really listen to it. Now, he said, I want you to sing it again. But look, one point I must make clear is you must not try to sing it. Don't try. All you have to do is to think of the tune and let it sing itself. And then they did very well. And he turned to the Archbishop and said, that's good theology, isn't it? I got the story from the Archbishop. So apparently he approved. So this is the principle of Wu Wei. We have all kinds of common expressions like roll with the punch, things like that, like Shakespeare saying there's a tide in the affairs of men which taken at its flood leads on to fortune. We have an innate folk wisdom which realizes that this is a fundamental principle. So whereas the emphasis in the Confucian tradition in China is on interference to a large extent, keeping things in order. There's a certain anxiety about the whole thing. The emphasis of Taoism is to trust in the course of nature, about which I have to tell you two Chinese stories. One is the farmer, both about farmers and their sons. One evening, the farmer's son came in very, very late from the fields, after all the rest of the family was late for dinner. And they said to him, what have you been doing? Well, he said, I've been helping the corn to grow. Next morning, when everybody got up, they found that all the corn was dead. Because what he had done late the night before was that every new shoot of corn, he had pulled it up a little, making mud. Another story that is told is about a farmer who lost a horse, ran away, and all his friends came round and said, that's too bad. And he said, maybe. The next day, the horse returned, and it brought 7 wild horses with it. And they said, my, that's great. And he said, maybe. The next day, his son, in attempting to train one of these horses, was thrown and broke a leg. And everybody came around and said, oh, that's too bad. And he said, maybe. The next day, the conscription officers came around and rejected his son because he had a broken leg. And everybody came to congratulate him and said, isn't that great? And he said, maybe. So you see, this farmer was with the cause of things. And he knew, it goes this way and it goes that way. It goes up and it goes down. Because if it didn't go down, you would never know you were up. And if you try to be permanently up, or always right, you're trying to arrange everything in this room so that everything is up and nothing is down, or that everything's on the front and there's no back. And that is an impossible state of affairs. Well, now those, I'm going to stop here because I don't want you to take in too much at once, or to try to. Just to rehearse it, we've discussed essentially 3 principles. The one that we can't discuss at all, because that's basic, that's the Tao. The next is the principle of the mutuality, the interdependence of the opposites, that they are different but inseparable. And that goes, of course, for you as self and the world as other. You can't understand what you mean or sense or experience as self without the contrasting sense of other. That means self and other go together. They're really one, but they look different. The third principle is the Wu Wei, the art of coming into accord with the course of nature by flowing with it and not resisting it, not trying,
Okay, this is De Mago Arabico Muhammad on the Arabian Magus Muhammad. Behold, in these chapters have I, thy father, restricted myself, not speaking of any immediate echo of a word in the world, because these men, being long since withdrawn into their silence, it is their one word, and that alone, that resoundeth undiminished through time. Thou, Muhammad, who followeth, is darkened and confused by his nearness to our own time, so that I say not save with diffidence that his word Allah, A-L-L-H, may mean this or that, but I am bold concerning his doctrine of the unity of God, for God is man, and his doctrine of the unity of God, for God is man, and he said therefore man is one. And his will was to unite all men in one reasonable faith, to make possible cooperation of all races in science, yet because he rose in the time of the greatest possible corruption and darkness, when every civilization and every region had fallen into ruin by the malice of the great sorcerer of Nazareth, as some say, he is still hidden in the dust of the Simum, and we may not perceive him in his true self of glory. Nevertheless, behold, O my son, this mystery. His true word was La, Allah, L-A space A-L-L-H. That is to say, there is no God. And La'al is that mystery of mysteries which thine own eye pierced in thine initiation. And of that truth have the illusion and falsehood enslaved the souls of men, as it is written in the book of the Magus. On the great beast himself, the Logos of the Aeon, whose word is Thelema, de se ipso taumeta feriam ta something cujus verbum est ohema. Yeah, so the Logos of the Aeon. O my son, meseemeth in certain hours that I am myself fallen on a time even more fearful and fatal than did Mohammed, peace be upon him. But I read clearly the word of the Aeon, that is Abrahadabra, wherein is the whole mystery of the great work, as thou knowest, and I have the book of the law that was given unto me by him thou wottest of, and it is the interpretation of the secret will of man on every plane of his bygoming, and the word of the law is Thelema. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Now because love is the law, love under will, do I write this epistle for thee, that thou mayst fulfill this inmost will of mankind, making them capable of light, life, love, and liberty by the acceptance of this law, and the hindrance thereunto is but as the shell of its egg to an eaglet, thing foreign to itself, a protection until the hour strike, and then an end thereof.
Words to make white exclude black, or black exclude white. Now, all that's very simple, but I'm sure it will create lots of questions in your minds.
You've been listening to Alan Watts in Philosophy of the Tao Part 1 here on the Being in the Way. Alan.
If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, ride your bike.
Our loved ones, and then, of course, as you just said, allowed us to We were talking earlier. It's really rough news.
What is the secret source of things? And the latter half of life is the preeminently excellent time to find this out. It's something to do when you have finished with the family business. I'm not saying that that is a sort of unavoidable strict rule. Of course, one can study the Tao when very young, because it contains all kinds of secrets in it as to the performance of every kind of art or craft.
You can't put all your faith in a show, even if I'm married, which I'm not, but...
So I've been like clipping YouTube stuff and that one went viral.
Business or any occupation whatsoever. But it does, in China, in a way, it plays that role of a kind of safety valve for the more restricted way of life that Confucianism prescribes. And there is a sort of type in China who's known as the old rogue. He's a sort of intellectual bum, often found among scholars, who is admired very much, and who a type of character which had an enormous influence on the development of the ideals of Zen Buddhist life. He is one, you see, who goes with nature rather than against nature. Well, now, first of all, I'm going to talk about ideas which come strictly out of Lao Tzu's book, the Tao Te Ching. And, of course, the basic thing in the whole philosophy is the conception of Tao. This word has many meanings. And the book of Lao Tzu starts out by saying that the Tao which can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. Or there's a pun in there, which you can't quite put into English. You can't give all the meanings, because the word Tao means both the way or course of nature, or of everything. It also means to speak. So the actual opening phrase of the book, following this word Tao, is this, you see? And this character means can be, or can, able, something like that. So the way which can be, then give it its second meaning, spoken, described, uttered. But it also means the way that can be weighed. Not W-E-I-G-H, but W-A-Y-E-D. You know, you'd have to invent that word. The way that can be traveled, perhaps, is not the eternal way. In other words, there is no way in which the Tao, or following the Tao, there's no recipe for it. I can't give you any do-it-yourself instructions, A, B, C, D, as to how it's done. It was like when Louis Armstrong was asked, what is jazz? He said, if you have to ask, you don't know. Now that's awkward, isn't it? But we can gather what it is by absorbing certain atmospheres and attitudes connected with those who follow it. And from the art and the poetry and all the expressions and the anecdotes and stories that illustrate the philosophy of the way. So this word then, the way or the course of things, is not, you must understand this, some Christian missionaries translated Tao as the Logos, taking as their point of departure the opening passage of St. John's Gospel. In the beginning was the Word. Now, if you look up a Chinese translation of the Bible, it says in the beginning was the Tao. And the Tao was with God, and the Tao was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by it, and without it was not anything made that was made. So they've substituted Tao there. Now that
Okay, this is called a command to his son, mandatum ad filium sum. Here I reach forth mine hands against thee in the sign of the Emperor, O son of my bowels, for with all my magical might I did that thou fight manfully and labor with diligence, with sword and trowel, say I, in this work. For this is the first and last of all, that thou bid every man do what he will, in accord with his own true nature. Therefore also blast thou that lies that man is of a fallen and evil nature. For the word of sin is restriction, the doubt of his own Godhead, the suppression of it, which is the blasphemy against his own Holy Spirit. Saith not the book of the law that it is a lie, this folly against self? Therefore to every man in every circumstance say thou do what thou wilt, and teach him, if he yet waver, how to discover his true nature, earnestly and with ardor, even as I have striven to teach thee, yea, and more also. Wherefore he begat his son, so that there be freedom. Quare filium creavit ut fiat libertas. Do what thou wilt. Be this our slogan of battle in every act, for every act is conflict. Their victory leapeth shining before us, for who may thwart true will, which is the order of nature herself? Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that, and no other shall say nay, for if that will be true, its fulfillment is of a surety, as daylight following sunrise. It is as certain as the operation of any other law of nature. It is destiny. Then if that will be obscured, if thou turn from it to wills diseased or perverse, how canst thou hope? Fool, even thy turns and twists are in the path to thine appointed end. But thou art not sprung of the slave's loins. Thou standest firm and straight. Thou dost thy will, and thou art chosen. Nay, for this work wast thou begotten in a magic bed, that thou shouldst make men free. On his frailty, de sua debilitate. Listen attentively, my son, while I with heavy heart make confession to thee of mine own frailty. Thou knowest that I made renunciation of my wage, taking this body immediately after my death, the death of Eliphas Levi Zached, as men say, that I might attain to this great work. It is now 20 years, as men count years, that I came to my first understanding of my true nature, and aspired to that work. Now then, at the first I made no error. I abandoned my chosen career. I poured out my whole fortune without one thought. I gave my life up utterly to the work without keeping back the least imaginable thing. So then I made swift strides along the path, but in the dhyanas that were granted unto me in Kandy, in the island of Lanka, I used up my whole charge of magical energy, and for 2 years I fell away from the work. On the hand that upholds the Magis, de manuque magum sustenent, Now it may be well that such periods of recuperation are necessary to such weak souls as mine, and so no ill. But I fell from my will and sought other ends in life, and so the hand came upon me and tore away that which I desired, as thou knowest. Also it is written in the temple of Solomon the king. Yet consider also these 2 years as a necessary preparation for the greatest of all events which befell me in El Kahira, in the land of Cam, the choice of me is the word of the Eon. Now then, for a while I worked with my will, though not wholly, and again the hand reached forth and smote me. This, albeit my slackness was but as a boy playing truant, not a revolt against myself. Wherefore, despite all, I made much progress in short time. On his sin, de suo peccato. Now then, well schooled, I strove no more against my nature, and worked with all my will. Thou knowest well how greatly I was rewarded, yet in this last initiation to the grade of Magus, wherein 73 days, as men count days, is but one day. The ordeal grew so fierce and intolerable that I gave back a step. I did not utterly renounce the work, but I swore not to continue unless mine agony were abated. But after 15 days I came to myself in a certain ordeal wherein I knew myself finally that I could not do other than take up that fearful burden that had broken my spirit, and for those 15 days have I not suffered infinite things? Was not the tree of my work frozen, one branch withered, and one blasted? Look no more, O my son, upon thy father's shame. On his victory through the name Babylon, the sua victoria per nomen Babylon, and after is dawn, for I have toiled through the night in my great love and care of thee. How is it with me? It is well, for I have found myself. I have found my will. The obstacles that daunted me are seen to be but shadows of shadows. Grace be unto Our Lady Babylon. Thus it is written in the book of the law, remember all ye that existence is pure joy, that all the sorrows are but as shadows, they pass and are done, but there is that which remains. Learn then that it is in the contemplation of division that sorrow is, for division is the formula of Choronzon. It is therefore discreet for thee to unite each element of sorrow with its opposite, in whose triumph of Hymen is ecstasy, until by the apprehension of the new great opposite the idea is again seen as sorrow. This then is the issue from sorrow, and thou mayst understand that I now also am confident in the necessity of this my fall to prepare the formula of mine exaltation. Therefore, my son, thus hail me, blessing and worship to the beast, the prophet of the lovely star. On the unutterable secret. Der Arcano Nefando, my son, learn this concerning magic, that the yang moveth, and thus giveth itself up eternally. But the yin moveth not, seeking ever to enclose or restrict, reproducing in its own likeness what impression soever is made thereon, yet without surrender. Now the Tao absorbeth all without reproduction, so then let the yang turn thereto, and not unto the yin. And that thou mayst understand this, I say, it is a mystery of Otio. For the sun ariseth not, and entereth to strike upon the high altar of the minister by the great western gates, but by the rose oriel doth he make way and progress to his pageant. O my son, the doors of silver are wide open, and they tempt thee with their beauty, but the narrow portal of pure gold shalt thou come more nobly to the sanctuary. Behold, thou knowest not how perfect is this magic. It is the dearest bought and holiest of our arcana. What then is like unto my love toward thee, that bestoweth upon thee this treasure of my wisdom? My son, neglect it not, for it is the exorcism of exorcisms and the enchantment of enchantments.
make a very funny effect on a Chinese philosopher, because the idea of things being made by the Tao is absurd. The Tao is not a manufacturer, and it's not a governor. It doesn't rule, as it were, in the position of a king. Although the book, the Tao Te Ching, is written for many purposes, but one of its important purposes is as a manual of guidance for a ruler. And what it tells him is essentially, rule by not ruling. Don't lord it over the people. And so he says the great Tao flows everywhere, both to the left and to the right. It loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them. And when good things are accomplished, it lays no claim to them. In other words, the Tao doesn't stand up and say, I have made all of you, I have filled this earth with its beauty and glory, fall down before me and worship. The Tao, having done anything, always escapes and is not around to receive any thanks or acknowledgement, because it loves obscurity. And Lao Tzu said the Tao is like water. It always seeks the low level which human beings abhor. So it's a very mysterious idea. Tao, then, is not really equivalent with any Western or Hindu idea of God, because God is always associated with being the Lord. Even in India, the Brahman is often called the Supreme Lord, although that was the term more strictly applicable to Ishvara, the manifestation of Brahman in the form of a personal God. But Bhagavan, the Lord, Krishna, his song is the Bhagavad Gita, the song of the Lord. There's always the idea of the king and the ruler attached, but not in the Chinese Tao philosophy. The Tao is not something different from nature, from ourselves, from our surrounding trees and waters and air. The Tao is the way all that behaves. And so the basic Chinese idea of the universe is really that it's an organism. And as we shall see when we get on to Zhuangzi, who is the sort of elaborator of Lao Tzu, he sees everything operating together so that nowhere can you find the controlling center. There isn't any. The world is a system of interrelated components, none of which can survive without each other. Just as in the case of bees and flowers, you will never find bees around in a place where there aren't flowers, and you will never find flowers around in a place where there aren't bees or insects that do the equivalent job. And what that tells us secretly is that although bees and flowers look different from each other, they're inseparable. They, to use a very important Taoist expression, they arise mutually. This is one of the great phrases from the second chapter of Lao Tzu's book, where he says, this character means to have or to be. And this next one is a very important character in Taoist philosophy. It means no, negative, wu in Chinese, not to be. And then this curious expression, for which we don't have a really good corresponding idea in traditional Western thought. So, to be and not to be mutually arise. This character is based on the picture of a plant, something that grows out of the ground.
Okay, I'm gonna read a few more of these. This is on the secret through which our spirit is received in the body. De arcano per quod spiritus quidem in corpore recipiator. Here now is another formula of power. Good to invoke any being to manifest in thyself. First invoke him by the power of all thy spells and conjurations with mind, concentrated in will, vehement toward him, as I have written in many books. But because thou art Nemo, thou mayst safely invoke him, no matter of what nature within thy circle. Now then, do thou confer on him as the guerdon of his obedience the dignity of a soul seeking incarnation, and so proceed to consecrate thine acts by performing the Mass of the Holy Ghost. Then shall that spirit make himself body from those elements, and thou, partaking thereof, makest thine own body his machinery of manifestation, and thus mayst thou work with any spirit soever, yet this shall serve thee most in common life. Also the qualities are well defined in the cards of the tarot, so that thou hast a clear-cut means of developing thy powers according to the need of the time. But learn also this, to work constantly under the guidance of thine holy guardian angel, so that thy workings be always in harmony and in accord with thy true will. On the Kabbalistic key of this art, De Clavi Kabbalistica Hui Arti. Now then, to thee who art long since master of high magic, it will be easy to show how the Mass of the Holy Ghost, sung even in ignorance, may work many a wonder by virtue of the force generated, being compelled to manifest on other than its own plane. Now then is the theory of the mystery of the Aeon, that I, being the Logos appointed thereunto, did create an image of my little universe in the mind of the woman of scarlet. That is, I manifested mine whole magical self in her mind. Thus then in her, as in a mirror, have I been able to interpret myself to myself. Thou also in thine own way hast the power to create such an image, but be thou sure and alert, testing constantly the persons in that image by the holy Kabbalah, and by the true signs of brotherhood. For each person therein shall be a part of thyself, made individual and perfect, able to instruct thee in thy path. Yet often there shall be others that are to aid thee in thy working, or to oppose it. And in this matter thou shalt read especially the record of thy father, his working with Sororahitha, blessed be her name unto the ages, and certain others to boot, on the Mass of the Holy Ghost. De Missa Spiritus Sancti. Now at last, O my son, may I bring thee to understand the truth of this formula that is hidden in the Mass of the Holy Ghost. For Horus, that is Lord of the Aeon, is the child crowned and conquering. The formula of Osiris was, as thou knowest, a word of death, that is, the force laid long in darkness, and by putrefaction came to resurrection. But we take living things and pour in life and spirit of the nature of our own will, so that instantly and without corruption the child, as it were, the word of that will, is generated, and again immediately taketh up his habitation among us, to manifest in force and fire. This Mass of the Holy Ghost is then the true formula of the magic of the Aeon, even the Aeon of Horus. Blessed be he in his name, Ra-Hor-Kuit. And thou shalt bless also the name of our father Merlin, Frater Superior of the OTO. For that by 7 years of apprenticeship in his school did I discover this most excellent way of magic. Be thou diligent, O my son, for in this wondrous art is no more toil, sorrow, and disappointment, as it was in the dead Aeon of the slain gods. On the complete formula, de formula tota. Here then is thy schedule for all operations of magic. First thou shalt discover thy true will, as I have already taught thee, and that bud thereof, which is the purpose of this operation. Next, formulate this bud will as a person, seeking or constructing it, and naming it according to thine holy Kabbalah and its infallible rule of truth. Third, purify and consecrate this person, consecrating upon him and against all else. This preparation shall continue in all thy daily life. Mark well. Be ready a new child immediately after every birth. Fourth, make an especial and direct invocation at thy Mass, being the introit, formulating a visible image of this child, and offering the rite of incarnation. Fifth, perform the Mass, not omitting the ecclesies, and let there be a golden wedding ring at the marriage of thy lion with thine eagle. Sixth, at the consumption of the Eucharist, accept the child, losing their consciousness in him, until he be well assimilated within thee. Now then do this continuously, for by repetition cometh forth both strength and skill, and the effect is cumulative. If thou allow no time for it to dissipate itself. Kabbalistic considerations on this formula. De hac formulae considerationes Kabbalistica. Behold, moreover, my son, the economy of this way, how it is according to the Tao, fulfilling itself wholly within thine own sphere, and it is utterly in tune with thine own will on every plane, so that every part of thy nature rejoiceth with every other part, communicating praise. Now then learn also how this formula is that of the word abrahadabra. First head is the triangle erect upon twin squares. Of head it need I not to write, for he hath hidden himself in the book of the law. The substance is the Father, the instrument is the Son, and the metaphysical ecstasy is the Holy Ghost, whose name is Hriu, H-R-I-L-I-U. These are then the Sun, Mercury, and Venus, whose sacred letters are R, B, and D, but the last of the diverse letters is H, which in the tarot is the star, whose eidolon is D. And herein is that arcanum concerning the Tao, of which I have already written. Of this I will not write more plainly, but mark this, that our Trinity is our path inwards in the solar system, and that H being of Our Lady Nuit Stare, is an anchor to this magic, which else were apt to deny our wholeness of relation to the outer as to the inner. My son, ponder these words and profit by them, for I have wrought cunningly to conceal or to reveal according to thine intelligence, O my son.
So, you could say positive and negative, to be and not to be, yes and no. Light and dark arise mutually, come into being. There's none is cause and effect. It's not that relationship at all. It's like the egg and the hen. So as the bees and the flowers coexist in the same way as high and low, back and front, long and short, loud and soft. All those experiences are experienceable only in terms of their polar experience. So the Chinese idea of nature is that all the various species arise mutually because they interdepend. And this total system of interdependence is the Tao. It involves certain other things that go along with Tao, but this mutual arising is the key idea to the whole thing. And it is, if you want to understand Chinese and Oriental thought in general, it is the most important thing to grasp. Because you see, we think so much in terms of cause and effect. We think of the universe today in Aristotelian and Newtonian ways. And in that philosophy, the world is all separated. It's like a huge amalgamation of billiard balls. And they don't move until struck by another, or by a cue. And so everything is going tock, 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 all over the place. One thing starting off another in a mechanical way. But of course, from the standpoint of 20th century science, we know perfectly well now that that's not the way it works. We know enough about relationships to see that that mechanical model which Newton devised was all right for certain purposes. But it breaks down now because we understand relativity. And we see how things go together in a kind of connected net rather than in a chain of billiard balls banging each other around. So, in the philosophy of the Tao, it is said, it's always being said, this is, you read this in every art book about Chinese art, that in Chinese painting, man is always seen as in nature rather than dominating it. You get a painting entitled Poet Drinking by Moonlight, and you see a great landscape, and after some search with a magnifying glass, at last you see the poet stuck away in a corner somewhere drinking wine. Whereas if we painted the subject poet drinking by moonlight, the poet would be the most obvious thing in the picture. There he would be, dominating the whole thing, the landscape off somewhere behind him. But all the Chinese painters put man, I mean, the painters of the great classical tradition, there are Chinese painters who specialize in family portraits and do these very formal paintings of someone's ancestor sitting on a throne. It's quite a different category. But the Taoist-inspired painters, the Zen-inspired painters, have this view of man as an integral part of nature, something in it, just as everything else is in it, flowers and birds, and not there, sent into this world, commissioned by some sort of supernatural being to come into this world and farm it and dominate it. So then, the whole conception of nature is as a self-regulating, self-governing, indeed democratic organism. But it has a totality. It all goes together, and this totality is the Tao. So then we move to a second term that is extremely important. The expression Ziran is the term that we translate nature when we translate Chinese. But this term expresses this whole point of view. It doesn't say nature, natura, which means, in a way, class of things. It means, literally, self, so. What is so of itself? What happens of itself? And thus, spontaneity. And in the Tao Te Ching, early on, Lao Tzu says, the Tao's method is to be so of itself. Now, we might translate that automatic, were it not that the word automatic has a mechanical flavor. Ziran, as this is called, or Shizen in Japanese, means spontaneous, yes. It happens as your heart beats. You don't do anything about it. You don't force your heart to beat. You don't make it beat. It does it by itself. Now, figure a world in which everything happens by itself. It doesn't have to be controlled. It's allowed. Whereas you might say the idea of God involves the control of everything going on. The idea of the Tao is the ruler who abdicates and lets all the people, trusts all the people to conduct their own affairs. To let it all happen. So, this doesn't mean, you see, that there isn't a unified organism. Everything is in chaos. It means that the more liberty you give, the more love you give, the more you allow things in yourself and in your surroundings to take place, the more order you will have. This past karma. The popular theory of karma, the word that literally means action or doing in Sanskrit, so that when we say that something that happens to you is your karma, it's like saying in English it's your own doing. But in popular Indian belief, karma is a sort of built-in moral law.
Okay, Narjas, hope you enjoyed this broadcast this morning. Hope you have a pleasant afternoon. God bless. Talk to you soon. Take care. Stay beautiful and stay wise. Stay happy. Stay healthy. Stay wise. Take care. Bye.
Yeah. Well then good. You know what's up. Alright, let's go for it, honey badger.
Okay. Are you
I'm Son's Habibi. That's it. Son, who's your Habibi? Only me.
Is that a hat? What's Habibi?
The fuck? The fuck?
Am I going to heaven?
Come to Dubai, Habibi. Like you never heard that? What the fuck? You live under a rock?
Is that a food?
Trailer? Yeah, like dude. Like my boy, my homie. I'm your Habibi.
Say that's not Habibi.
No, she's a
She's
female.
not hot, man.
She's a female. It doesn't work.
She's not hot, man.
Oh,
You had a tan, man.
getting weird.
Is it though? So are you going to heaven, Taylor?
I don't know who's going to heaven, but I do think that everyone is like gonna be restored. So I don't know if that's like
Is that different?
maybe. I'm not sure. Not sure. I don't know if like there's gonna be a new earth and then there's gonna be people on earth and there's gonna be people in heaven. I'm not sure, but I do believe that everyone is gonna be restored and reconciled back to God.
Where is God? Isn't he everywhere?
Holy Trinity?
I am a Christian, yes.
And how do you believe in God? Three parts.
Yeah, I'm not here to argue the Trinity, but right now I think I'm just kind of here to hang out
Yeah,
with
let's just keep
Pastor.
it basic. So,
Open it up, man.
alright, so, I thought you said he's unknowable, but then you said the more you contemplate him, the more you learn about it.
Yeah, so trying to explain God or have someone know God by way of language is going to be a very difficult task. Like, you're always going to meet obstacles and you're going to fall short. But more so, like, even, so let's, if I had to say, like, through words, maybe we could get some kind of understanding, and even more clear, we'd be able to maybe designate what God is not to try to figure out maybe what God is and even fall short there. But closer we get through contemplation, even like meditation, contemplation through experience. So even with language, there's so much barriers that occurs there because it's beyond, in my perspective, it is a little bit beyond our understanding. We can get close, we can get equivalent to certain things, like we can say things like God, slept, or God never slept, and all of these are just an attempt that are not so accurate, but they're trying to
Okay, so they're wrong.
I wouldn't say that they're wrong. They just fall short of the fullness of trying to explain.
Alright, so what percentage
Even like with
accuracy do you think they've achieved?
Barely, because I don't think it really.
Well, didn't you say
I
it's
don't even-
unknowable?
I don't even think that we can conceptualize to the full degree. Like, let's say, for example, your question about is God everywhere? Yes and no. Like, it's almost like this. It's like God creates a painting, right? And in that painting, his creativity is splashed. Every stroke of the painting is associated to God, and God is, demonstrated in that painting through his creativity. However, is God the painting? You know what I mean? Like, but yet it is coming from God. Like, we have that painting because it was birthed and is not manifestation, but is a part of God's creativeness. So yes and no, like at the same time. And Honey Badger, I really don't even know if my answers are good or if I'm doing it right. I'm just kind of playing along with you to see where we get.
Yeah, no, I don't think they're good at all.
You're such a dork, dude.
Well, I mean, you started off by saying he's unknowable. You said that I asked you if you're going to heaven. You didn't know whether or not you were, and you said that you just believe everyone's going to return to God. And I said, well, isn't God everywhere? And you don't know where he is. So it just sounds like you don't really know much. That's good. At least you admitted.
Yeah. I think that, like I said, any linguistic ability to explain God is going to fall a little bit short, but experience, contemplation, meditation, prayer, much more closer than anything that could be explained. And yes, I will fall short. All of us will. All of us, because we're so limited in our understanding.
Are you on page with Rainbow Love and her understanding of how God works?
So I think that I actually know who Rainbow Love is in person, and I think that she is changing her. It could be. So there's one particular. So you actually, I know that you bump heads with Blue. Do you know who Blue is? Blue Inferno in the audience.
I don't know you personally, so you're mistaking me for someone else, I think.
Oh, okay. Well, Blue Inferno that is in the audience, I know her personally, and Honey Badger, you and her kind of,
I don't see her.
Oh, she's not here right now, but in other chats, you and her engage quite a bit. And she has so much in common with Rainbow that I thought that Rainbow, it might be her cosplaying Rainbow, because she plays different characters on the internet. Like she'll troll and change her name, but
Yeah, that's not me.
yeah, all of her views align with Rainbow. So I thought she's Rainbow, and we're actually friends in real life. Her.
No, I only use this one account.
Yeah, she would never come to me and tell me it's not me if it wasn't if it was her. So then yeah, Rainbow's not her. She trolls a lot of different people. So.
But I don't know. So far, a lot of the things that Rainbow has put down, I have not found a lot of qualms with. Is that the right word?
Like I don't find a lot of areas of contention. So
Could you steel man one of her main positions that you hold that you agree with?
yeah, so one of the things that she I believe holds is that like I think we were both saying the same thing the other day about Jesus being the word of God and it not really being confound just to a book, and that what parts of the book, like what we have is human understanding and human record of that experience of the divine, of revelation. And so I agree with, I think I agree with that. Yeah.
She's getting
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, but that's exactly where I started, right? I said more than anything that explains or through language, contemplation is how you know. Through you can understand, not understand God, but you can know more about God through contemplation, prayer, meditation than words. Right. It's like saying, oh, I tried this fruit. It's called a mango. And this is what it looks like. And here's a picture of it. And this is a description of how it tastes. Use Old Bay on everything, or we gotta add spice. Our collard greens don't necessarily have spice. Y'all don't have nothing, to be honest.
Mine has like a 7, crackling pepper. With my collards, I'll typically do 2 ham hocks in a cast iron pot, and then I'll go underneath my sink and I'll grab the Crisco and I'll get me like 2 scoops of lard out of the Crisco and put it in there, and then add salt as needed.
About reality, about God, about not God, about
That's a lot. Can we just focus on one?
well, what are your beliefs?
About which?
About all of them.
Well, okay, which one do you want to focus on?
You pick one.
I know you're coming.
Existence.
Let's go.
I haven't decided. I've been wanting to come for a long time, and I'm just taking care of my mother, and I'm gonna do it. I haven't figured out just
But
yet.
apparently,
I gotta get it down
I haven't
to my
tasted
mother.
it, so I wouldn't.
You know who one of the first people
Yeah,
is
you're
that I
basically
told I
saying
wanted to see?
a mango isn't in kosher.
Or is it one of the first people?
Wait, no, don't tell me. Yes, this was
Oh, sorry.
Yes, but we're really
This was
not
my-
because he takes
Yes.
He's such a character, and he's old school kablistic, you know?
Is that a mouth thing, or is this just a mind?
Listen,
How do you
You come to Arnold's room, man, we thought so happy days.
when I
Oh,
talk,
there's so many
back to
reasons.
my home, coexistence.
Through contemplation, through meditation, through prayer.
brain chemistry?
He's a classic.
What you just said?
Yeah.
Contemplation.
You should put him in a movie.
I think it's a,
I wouldn't
it's
have
a,
this.
it's a spiritual
You say you would?
factor.
Oh, now we're throwing
Yeah, I
spirit
would.
into
I
this.
would wish
It
this.
sounds like whenever a question is asked to a theist, we just get this like barrage of salad bar antics. It's crazy.
Well, that's exactly what I told you, that language has its limits when it comes to explaining something that is a little bit, like, go back to the mango theory, keep playing on that, because until you actually seen a mango, held a mango, tasted a mango, it's like saying, well, what's God? Well, you have to experience it. It's like saying, well, what's a mango? I've never seen a mango. I don't know what a mango is. What are you talking about? What is this mango thing? I don't believe in mangoes. So I guess my question would be, Honey Badger, do you like accept that people are experiencing God? Do you accept the fact that people are they being dishonest? Are they being honest in their experience?
I think some of them are honestly believing it, that they are, but I don't think they actually are. That's a lot of
So what is it that they're experiencing?
their own brain states and conditioning and delusion.
Interesting.
Right? But you said he's unknowable. You said he's unknowable. So I mean, I don't know how you get to people are experiencing it when it's unknowable.
Yeah, more through language, like trying to describe God, it has its limits because it's really beyond what we can really truly fathom. Like what we can really truly fathom, we have more success in kind of saying what God is not and trying to figure out what God is than actually postulating what God is. But you can know more like than trying to linguistically explain, just like the mango in experience. What's coming to mind for me right now is that little story about the guy whose house was covered guy died. This is why
We got so mad with that. And then, who wanted to say something, and they were so mean, and
I think it's funny that we talked about this. I've never heard of anything where a god does anything. It's always dudes.
Well, what do you think the driving force is behind these dudes?
What do you mean? What your claim is that it's God? Is that what?
Yeah,
Okay, so would you apply that to everything?
yeah.
Okay, so when there's murder and rape happening, that's just God's power.
Well, see, now here's where.
Well, see, now I'm gonna change my story now because I just said it's everything. So.
Sorry.
Okay, let's hear it.
This is where the difference between the carnal mind and the spiritual mind come into play. Because if you believe, you have to finish. I was interrupted. It's very difficult to talk.
Well, I mean, I just feel like you're gonna go on another solid rampage. So go ahead.
Well, if you'd like my solid rampage, then mute up, and if you don't, I'll mute up.
Okay. Can I just make the dressing?
Okay, I'll mute.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I don't want to waste time with your word salad. But what would you say to that, Sarah? Do you think the power behind all these things that humans do is attributed to God?
I think that the fact that God has allowed suffering and pain into the world, it makes it, yes, attributed to God, but I do believe that God has allowed for us to make these decisions. And since God has allowed us to make these decisions, then yeah, you could attribute them to God.
Okay, so when you say allow, what does that mean?
Meaning that God has, like, if you're an uncle, you could be the best uncle in the world, or you can be the worst uncle in the world.
Yeah. And what does that mean?
So God has allowed this to be possible for somebody to be the worst uncle or the best uncle in the world. And since he's allowed it, we can attribute God, being responsible for allowing it. But it doesn't mean that that's what God necessarily, that God wanted you to be the worst uncle in the world.
Okay.
Like, God didn't allow you to be the worst uncle in the world, but God allowed you to be the worst uncle in the world by giving you the option to be the worst uncle in the world.
Okay, so you don't think God actually has plans?
No, I absolutely believe that God has plans, and that plan is to ultimately reconcile the whole world.
Yeah, you have a choice. You have an absolute choice to create your own decisions to, like Sarah said, be the worst uncle in the world, or you have the choice to not do that. So your choice, whether or not you act of your own volition or that of like what would be the right thing to do, is your choice.
Okay, yeah, so God isn't necessarily focused on free will as a priority, right?
That's like saying if a child wants to put their hand on a hot element, the parent has their free will to let them do it or not.
Yeah, so free will isn't really the thing that he's trying to
But
preserve.
then you're saying,
right?
oh, what a horrible parent, they just let their child burn their hand. How dare they do that? That's a horrible God. But like, which you can't have it both ways.
Yeah, that's what I would say to you. I would think that if God is interested in preserving free will, then he would actually intervene, because he does intervene. And he would preserve the free will of victims every time a rapist is around, right?
Then how would you ever learn anything?
Oh, this is the whole soul building argument now? Is that what we're going with?
I mean,
So a person needs to be raped. Is that what you're saying, Rainbow? In order to learn something?
No,
That's
the
fucking wild
rapist
shit, dude.
needs to learn not to rape.
Wait,
It has
what
nothing to do
are
with the
you
victim.
on?
If you want to play the victim, then you'll be the victim. If you want to play the rapist, then you'll be the rapist. So it's your
You
choice.
sound like a crazy person.
Okay, well, you're
You
entitled
do.
to your
You literally sound like a crazy person, dude. It's fucking crazy.
That's your opinion.
I think you sound like a crazy person.
choose to be raised.
Well, I think you sound like a crazy person, so I guess we're just
Have
both
I
crazy
said
people.
something that's wild? Like rape, like you can choose to be a victim, and like God, like you gotta learn to not be a rapist. Like, am I saying shit like that, or are
Well,
you?
to be fair, honey, like I remember, like it took me like 23 tries before I got that one down.
Yeah, I'm still learning.
I mean,
Don't say stuff like that.
Yeah,
What is it
yeah, I
in
told the
you?
judge I finally mastered this skill, right?
What is it in you that is deciding to or not to be a rapist? Like, are you a rapist?
No,
Not anymore.
Okay, what is it in you that has chosen not to be?
I think it's just the way my brain chemistry is set up. I'm not predisposed to that kind of behavior.
So you think that rapists and not rapists has to do with brain chemistry?
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
And the brain, where's that chemistry coming from? It's just out of thin air?
No, I think it comes from our brains. I just said so.
It comes from experience.
Rainbow, I don't know how you don't get banned on here. You say wild ass shit.
How does chemistry come from experience?
It's not chemistry, that's what I'm saying.
What is it, the soul?
No, a child that grows up to become a rapist had a different experience than a child that didn't grow up to be a rapist based on experience, not brain chemistry, unless there was some sort of mental illness, which typically comes from experience.
I would say that, like, to draw a tie between what you all are saying, experience can alter the brain chemistry. So,
This is like a
for
perfect example of like you dumb people wasting time talking about nothing. This is awesome. So I'm gonna go to the gym shortly. I hope they go on for hours. They might go on for like hours.
Experience that caused the brain chemistry, whatever have
It'll be
you.
perfect. I'll come back. We'll still be
I
talking.
think that the
I'll have
idea
hours
is
of
that
content.
no matter how much on earth we break one another, or we break things, or we create destruction.
What I love about these rooms is that these people say so much more
Piece it back together
that
again. God is able
it's
to
like
take
how,
the most
if you ask
broken
them
of
to relate
everything
what they're
and have
talking
the
about
ability
now
put
to
it back
essentially
together
their
again.
anti-Semitic
Do you
Jew
think
hate,
that,
they'll be able to bridge that
that
gap.
people who attack and or sexually assault other people get punished later on by God?
So
This
the
is
way
funny.
that
Just a yes or no.
Yes or no?
As well.
Yeah, so okay, let me see real quick if I can
So do you agree with Rainbow Sailor that no is the answer?
no, so I'm gonna try to explain like what I'm saying. So
I'd rather just have a yes or no and then an explanation.
yeah, so
So the answer is yes, he does punish.
well, hold on, I wanna explain
thought you said yes.
something. No, something that's really important to explain. So a lot of people that are using like this punishment right of God, the way that they're explaining it is that like you do.
Wait, I'm talking about you. Do you believe that rapists and murderers get punished later on by God? Yes or no?
And you please let me. This is like really
No,
important.
I don't want the long-winded bullshit. Just say yes or no.
No, because it's really imperative that like.
It's not. It's not
Yes,
imperative.
it
We're gonna
really
listen to this, and it's not gonna be imperative. I
No, it
guarantee you.
is.
And
I
stop
guarantee. Like
being a child. And
All right. Sorry, Sayla. Go ahead.
okay. A child is a great example of what I'm saying. When a child does certain things, they often do it from not knowing any better, right? Like they do things that they really might not know any better. But yet we still use consequences to teach them what they don't know. So whatever consequences or punishment, if you will, that God is laying out is for the betterment and the learning of that child. So a lot of theists throw out this punishment like it's just punishment for what you've done bad. But it's really important to clarify that the consequences or the punishment of whatever it is, it's just like a child who doesn't know better, like needs to learn better. Like let's say for example, you told the child not to keep running out the front door, but the child keeps running out the front door into the
So is that a yes or a no? I'm still waiting on that part.
So whatever consequences and punishment that God is going to lay forward, and then yes.
Okay, so yes. Okay.
There's gonna be so there's gonna be consequences, but that consequences is in teaching the child and bettering the child.
Okay, so we're not talking about children. I asked if someone is a rapist.
No, we are children. We are.
Oh, okay. Well, adult children. So regardless, just
It's
drop
more
the
than
child
a
part.
judge and a
Okay.
more
answer is yes. There is a punishment, correct?
There are consequences to our behaviors that cause harm to us. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if a rapist rapes 50 women or 50 men, however you want to look at it, I'm not going to genderize them, and they end up dying, does a punishment ensue for that person later on when they're dead?
I don't even know about later on. It starts immediately.
How would you determine that?
Anyone that does stuff like that is probably already suffering in their soul and their mind. Maybe they might go to jail. Yeah, they're probably suffering in their mind and their soul. Then they probably go to jail. Maybe it causes them to have other behaviors that cause.
What if they don't? What if they just get away with it and they die peacefully in their own home playing video games?
Yeah, no matter what, there's a reverberation from their actions until that they get the understanding that they need to be rehabilitated.
I feel like you're saying a lot of things, but you're not really explaining much.
I'm trying my best.
Okay, so the question was on the table. A person is definitely criminally
That was like an acceptance of saying like I'm stupid, but I'm trying.
Okay, they actually have a great life because they're a psychopath and they're just enjoying their
This
life.
is like a perfect example of like Stella going through a job interview cycle that she can't fucking get hired anymore because people are like, oh fuck, she's stupid.
Family, right? Does that person get punished when they die by God?
I just don't believe that. I don't believe
so
that.
You don't think
Yeah,
that
I
happens.
just don't believe that people that carry that within them have normal.
Well, that's just your belief.
Or lives. Yeah.
So you don't know. You can just say I don't know.
I don't know.
Stella can't say I don't know. She doesn't know about the I don't know option.
Actions is not having is not whole, so they're gonna have repercussions from that.
That's sweet of you. I'm just asking about the God part, so maybe someone else can answer it because I don't think I got a straight answer from you.
I mean, Donald Rumsfeld is probably gonna die in his sleep, right?
He's already dead, dummy.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, remember the question, Sayla, is really simple. Like, if I were you, I would have just said, yeah, God doesn't like that shit and he's going to be punished. But, because that's what I hear from most people. They say, well, he's going to have his judgment day,
He's already being punished. That's the thing. Like, because he is in whatever state you're in, that, like, to be in a state of wanting to hurt others, you're you're in hell in certain aspects. Like any area of your life that you are suffering in, you are experiencing hell.
Okay, so then I was right. God isn't really necessarily focused on free will as a priority. I got you. Right? Wouldn't you agree?
I'm not sure. The only priority that I subscribe to God is our restoration.
Yeah, I don't even know what that means. But wouldn't you agree that free will isn't necessarily
Eventually Stella will get exhausted and leave, I guarantee.
Right?
She's not gonna stick around for this.
And then
It's too challenging
that
for her.
person might suffer some kind of hell on earth because of their mental states and they're getting some karma in their actual life on earth. So I guess I was right. Like God doesn't necessarily prioritize free will.
Restoration, like God's gonna restore the deck for me.
Restoration, like God is gonna restore all of us back to the primordial state.
But why not make us that way from the get-go? Like, why make something that needs to be restored? Like, no one goes, oh, I'm gonna make a 1945 Buick to restore it, right? Like, you get one that's already fucked up and used, and then restore that.
Because I think that the knowledge of good and evil is necessary for our evolution, our spiritual evolution.
But didn't God
How did
want
you
us
understand
to
that though, Sam?
stay away from the tree of good and evil?
Yeah, you said God wasn't knowable. So how did you come to that conclusion?
We're not talking about God. We're talking about the knowledge.
Well, you're talking about his plans and what he wants.
I'm talking about the knowledge of good and evil seems to be necessary. That's why it exists.
But if you read Genesis, right, God did not intend for us to know, to eat from the tree of knowledge of good.
Yeah, I disagree with that idea. I even believe that God walked away and made the option available.
I mean, it's in his book.
But it does say that.
Please no eating on mic.
That's what I'm saying, Salah. Do you know? Have you read Genesis?
Yeah, I don't think that God didn't know that Adam was gonna eat from the fruit. Like it caught him by surprise, and he's like, "Oh my God, I had no idea, Adam, you were gonna do this." I even think that he leaves them in the garden for the opportunity to be available, and I think that it's a necessary part of our experience, or else God would not have allowed it to happen.
Sarah,
I
do you
agree
believe
with you
that?
with him knowing that, but I think the problem you would have, I'm a Christian too, but like saying that you won't believe in the understanding the punishment as you were answering, right? Then you would have to say, why would he allow them to start with anyway with that? But, I don't know. It's okay to, speak the truth and according to the scripture, let them know what they need to know.
Sarah, do you believe that?
And not kind of shy away.
Sarah, do you believe that when God created the setup in the garden, that the option was there to just choose to do the right thing?
Was the option there to do the right thing? Yeah, but I don't think that we would. I think every last one of us would have chosen no.
No, we're not talking about us. We're talking about Adam and Eve. So when Adam and Eve were in the garden, do you believe that God was like, yeah, they could choose to do what I say? Because that's actually what he wants, right? Like, he wanted them to not eat from the tree, right?
I think that just
Where do you get these ideas? Sayla, it's like you say he's unknowable, and I ask you a simple question, and then you're like, oh,
Yeah.
and then you start reading God's mind.
Honey,
It's just amazing.
I
listening.
said that using linguistics, it's more difficult to know God than contemplating, meditating, and through prayer. I'm talking about our ability to linguistically explain that which God is. God is more knowable through contemplation and experience than trying to verbalize what God is. We will fall short continually.
Okay, so you just say, I don't know, to everything asked of you.
No, because
Why?
I have.
Why wouldn't you just be honest and go, I don't fucking know? Just say it.
Because I have my intuition.
Yeah, but your intuitions are wrong, right?
It could be.
Yeah. It just sounds like you're like making a lot of excuses for things that you were like taught to believe as a child.
I wasn't taught this as a child.
You actually took this on as an adult?
Absolutely.
Well then, that's something to look into.
Okay, could I interject just for a minute, honey?
I don't know, Hans.
Okay, very quickly. The thing is, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what the tree of knowledge is, knowledge of good and evil. In Hinduism, there's Sit, Sat, Ananda. Sit is like an animal. They're not aware of themselves. Sat is like humans. They are aware of themselves. So that's what it said. Your eyes will be open and you'll know that the difference between good and evil. It's about good and evil for yourself. You become conscious of yourself, right? And then you are aware, you're looking at everything. Does this benefit me? Is this good for me or is this bad for me? And at that moment, you become separated from the oneness of creation because you're looking at everything in terms of yourself. Is this going to help me? Is this going to hurt me? And so what happens is people can look at things, they go overboard, be very incredibly selfish, which is what Cain did. He was greedy with his sacrifice to God, and then he became jealous. So he was looking at everything from how to benefit himself. And so it's just part of the test because the goats are always desiring things for themselves, and the fear comes when they think they won't get what they desire. So you're either submitting to your ego or you're submitting to God's will. And that's what that's about, in my opinion. So that's the original sin, right? That you're looking to benefit yourself instead of benefiting creation that you're a part of.
Honey, I got a question for you. How do you know the person? You kind of mocked Salah for saying that she had an experience of God. How do you prove that
She
person?
said she had an experience of God, and I mocked her.
Well, she was saying this through like her. I think she said through her experience. She can correct me again. But how do you prove that person doesn't have an experience of God?
No, I can't. I think people think they have experiences of something, and then they call it God.
Well, how do you know? So you're saying is the experience, even though they call it God, it's not God. But
Yeah, that's my belief. Yeah.
would it not be your opinion?
Yeah, that's my belief. Based on the evidence, it sounds like look, I'm
not
subject.
evidence, right? Based on the opinion.
No. Based on the evidence that isn't presented, no one could tell whether or not they actually experience God. But it sounds like your claim is that everyone experiences God, right? Because ontologically speaking, I'm a part of the plan. God is actually a part of my life, right? So I'm actually experiencing God on the daily, right?
No, that's not.
Oh, I'm not? God is a
Not
part of my life?
everyone.
Okay.
No, not everyone can experience it.
Not everyone can experience God. Wow, listen to this.
Absolutely not.
I disagree with the sheep. I do think that God is involved in all of our lives. Some just fail to recognize it.
But involvement and experience is two different things, Salah. I don't think you're understanding what he's saying, right? Because just because God is involved in everybody doesn't mean that everyone would have an experience of God, right? Because they could choose not to have that, right? They could be blinded to that.
Wait, you can choose to not experience God?
Yeah.
I mean,
Wow,
I think
this
that
is
there are
wild
times.
talk. You guys are all over the place.
Well, I do think that there are times that we do experience God, and then we try to reason it away, or try to find a logical reason, or override what we may have experienced. However,
Can you give an example of someone having an
the-
experience and
hold on a
denying
second.
it's God?
Let me just finish.
Exactly.
But ultimately, the experience is the responsibility of God, not the person. Like, I don't put that on the person that you chose just to, like, there are times, yes, I do believe that people will have an experience and then try to override it because of their pre-existing ideas. I do believe that.
But is there a time though
But
where
God
there is
is
no?
ultimately able to give an experience that the person no longer wants to override. He has that capacity too.
Sure. So by then, does it not mean that the person does not want to experience God by choosing to do that?
Yes, that God is the one that gets us to the place where we finally.
So not everyone can experience God.
No, I disagree. I disagree with that.
You literally just concluded that not everyone can experience God.
Can I have an experience and fail to recognize the experience? And is my failure of
If you fail to recognize it, you wouldn't have an experience.
But this is what no, that's not true. Like, you can have an experience and fail to recognize that you're having the experience. It doesn't negate the fact that you had the experience.
How do you discount for experience? How do you not claim to have, like, how do you reject an experience, right? How do you do that?
Exactly. And that's a hard thing to.
And more importantly, I would like to understand an example of someone having an experience, right? And then they're denying that it's. What are you saying? We're having experiences that are.
This happens all the time. It's a famous experiment. Right? You can lose weight and not realize it's fake. Like, you can have experiences that you don't know, like you don't recognize the truth of.
But if you don't recognize it, then it's not an experience. That's
You're dreaming, but you think you're awake. You're still dreaming. It's still an experience.
You're right. It's still an experience, right? What I'm trying to understand is, what I'm trying.
Long line.
One at a time, you guys.
God golly.
On a
helping me.
For an answer.
No, you're not helping me. I understand that experience.
You're interrupting the answer to
No,
your
you
question.
interrupted me.
I don't need the
No, you
raving
asked a
and the
question.
raging. Let's just keep this civil.
That's the question. I'm trying to answer.
All right,
your question. Look, there's that famous experiment with a chalkboard. A long line is drawn and a short line is drawn. In the room, people are asked, which is the longer line? Everybody in the room conspires, except for one, to answer that the short line is the long line. The question is, what will the 10th guy respond? Will he just call out the lines the way they are, or will he just go along with the crowd? And very often, more than half, the 10th guy will just go along with the crowd and say the short one is the long one. That's an example of denying experience.
They're having.
People, for social reasons, deny experiences all the
So
time.
you're saying
They're
the person?
confused.
So you're saying the person did not experience seeing the lines at all? What? You cannot deny having an experience. You have an experience, whether it be an
You deny
hallucination.
anything you want. You just say,
I mean, you can't deny it, but you have to experience it in order to know it, right? So like, if you like, you're saying is, like you've seen something of something that you could experience, but you've never actually like reached to that point, then you haven't experienced it. But if you did reach it, like for example, like people who are theists, right? They go to Christianity and they leave Christianity. They didn't accept it because they have an experience. But not all have an experience, right? Those, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, everybody claiming that, everybody knows God, and, well, not really.
Yeah, that's
But
my
that's
question. That's what I'm leading up to. I want to understand, how is it someone having an experience, and then thieves are claiming that you're denying that that experience is God? I want to understand that.
Yeah, so this is a pretty personal story, but so my mom and dad are pretty much atheists on a good day and agnostic. And I have a friend, and I know a lot of people scoff at this, but that's okay too, that has prophetic giftings. And so, not really a friend, actually somebody who's a spiritual leader. So a spiritual friend leader told my mom that she was going to come down. I'm not gonna say come down with something. I'm not using the best words, but let's just say come down with something, and that the doctors weren't going to be able to diagnose it, and they're going to continue to try to diagnose it and fall short, but a healing would go out and that she would be healed. Anyways, my mom got really pissed at this. Who the hell is he to tell me that I'm going to come down with something? And I was like, Mom, I heard that he said that you're going to be healed, and that you would be healed or whatever. So I think maybe 3 months after that, my mom developed this like pain in her head, like forehead area, and it just wasn't going away. They did scans where they did, looked at her sinuses, they looked at everything, and they just couldn't figure it out. So anyways, my atheist agnostic mom was in her bed, and she said that she was sleeping and that someone came into the room, and she was so sure that someone came into the room that she like braced herself to get hit. And then someone sat on the bed, and as soon as they sat on the bed, this fatherly figure, like this fatherly feeling came over her. And she said that Jesus reached out his hand and put it on her head, and she was healed. Now, here's the thing. Some time goes on after that, and my mom will totally deny it. Like, if you say, Mom, do you remember when you said that, Jesus came in and healed you? She's like, yeah, I don't know what was going on with that. It's just something I really just can't explain. I don't know. Like, she'll totally not even want to talk about it. Totally just, she doesn't attribute it to Jesus anymore. Like, her whole storyline is this. It's just something I really can't explain. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, brain chemistry is powerful, Sayla.
Yeah, well, that's denying an experience. Like, you don't understand. For my mom to say that it was Jesus that touched her head, it's like outlandish. It's like outlandish for her to say something like that.
She already experienced it.
Yeah.
She's denying.
She didn't deny the
But
experience.
we're talking about it, the person
She
that
didn't
never
deny the
really actually
experience.
saw that. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying. When Hani said that you theists say that you have experienced God or something like that, and I said not everyone experiences God, right? Your mother got to experience God, and she denied it. right? So that's different than to say that everybody have an experience, right? So, I mean, nobody will go against that.
Well, you don't know that her mom actually experienced God, right?
Well, I'm going based on the story, but
She gave a description of what she saw, right, in her experience.
exactly. But I'm
Doesn't
not
mean it
an
actually was
atheist.
God.
I am an atheist, so I believe that if she experiences God, I mean, that's fine. But she denied that experience. If she never experienced that, she would not know what that is. And the same way that when atheists full-time raised as an atheist without having to understand who God is, like there is a time where they actually won't experience God, even if God is giving them like a reason to experience it, right? So that's what we are saying. I mean, that's what I'm saying.
But let's accept that this apparition happened. Now, how would you then make the positive identification that it's God? Like the God in the Bible kills Egyptian children. So when I experience God, like I need him to come into my room and kill Egyptian children. Then I have this like, oh, that's a pattern that God does in the Bible, and then I experience
That is not a pattern, Benjamin. Stop.
If God is not killing Egyptian children, then how do I know it's the God of the Bible? That's a question I have.
I think that's a very dishonest question because if you read the Bible, that is not a pattern. But I think a personal experience is more subjective in a sense that only that person can experience it. So that's why I asked earlier.
God go to more than one house and kill Egyptian children? Because I think.
But you said it's like it's a consistent thing. That's very
Egyptian children.
dishonest
That
argument.
would be a pattern, wouldn't it?
No, that's very bad. That's a very bad argument. Just because let's say the United States went down to the Korean War, and then now you're associating that is a pattern for the United States to do. Like that's just nonsense. It just makes no sense. I think that's a dishonest argument.
But I would accept some alternatives. Like if I saw some kids and they made fun of people for being bald, and then bears came out of the woods and killed the kids.
Exactly.
Then I would say maybe that's God, right? But I need more than just
God
like
is also
an apparition showed up.
That's not an argument, honestly. It sounds like you have some kind of problem with God. You should take it up with God. But JCC, go ahead.
No, I was just laughing because you said bears come out of the woods. That's God. I'm like, what?
James, that's in the Bible.
Yeah, it is. It's what's it? Elisha. They were cursing at Elisha.
Yeah, I'm aware of the story, right?
Yeah, but I think that's a very dishonest argument to bring that. But you have a problem with God.
But what I'm saying is, if I'm going to positively ID an apparition as God, I need God to do God stuff.
Yeah, what about the part that he created?
Stuff.
What about the part that he created?
Oh,
the
yeah,
part that
he created a world. He
welcomed?
come into my bedroom.
The part that he
He
loved.
created a world on my desk, on my, side
Oh,
desk.
what about the part that he loved and was relational, which is what Salah's mom actually experienced?
Wait, he was loving when he killed Egyptian children, or when he had the bears come out of the woods?
He disciplines, of
And
course,
kills the
and he
children.
also loves, right?
Wait, he disciplined the Egyptian children for what? What did the Egyptian children do? Because I forgot that part. Is that not?
Well, they were part of this society that was oppressing the
So he disciplines people
But I
for
say-
being born in a country?
The story's more than that. Read it more, and then you'll understand. You can read more.
I want to know what the child did. I want to know what the children did to be punished. Because I want to not do that thing, whatever those children
Exactly,
did.
that's what I'm saying.
That's
If
something
you
I
read,
want
it'll
not to
give
do.
you the answer. Literally, it's like, when you read a story and read a book, like you wouldn't read a paragraph and ask me, right? You would read the whole thing and make sure that you actually understand.
You're pretending like I didn't read the whole Bible, like I read the whole Bible.
It sounds like you haven't read the whole thing, so you should go read it again.
Well, let's get past the evasion. What did the Egyptian children do that deserved them to die? And I want to be very specific here. I want to talk about the Egyptian child of the woman who was in a prison, an abandoned child because her parents are in the prison. This is in the text.
and this child, God kills them. So I want to report what you think the child of the prisoner did that deserved God killing in the middle of the night.
What prisoners?
You need me to read the Bible to you? Just hold on, I'll read the Bible to you.
Sure, go ahead. Spark my brain. But I don't think that's an honest argument anyway. I think it's just going to lead us.
You don't think that the problem of God being evil is a legitimate argument?
God is not evil.
It's just
the author of the book.
Discounting an argument that you can't address.
If the author of the book decides to write a story in which that is befitting to them, just because you read the story doesn't mean the author is evil, right? And so again, we live in a story that God created, and that He does what He wills, and therefore is not evil.
Right, nothing that happens is evil.
Live in a story.
Yeah, nothing at all, right? Nothing at all that happens is evil, right?
Now you and I would fit within that evil nature because we are acting outside of God's will. Because He created us to do good and treat each other with respect and honor.
So here's the text. I know you live in this story, so I wanna. You never read the story, but you live in this story.
I've
so
read it. I just don't know what I
Exodus.
just forgot. It's been a while.
You live in this story. Why would I need to read it to you if you live in this story?
No, read it.
Exodus 12.
Not that I have a problem with it anyway, but go ahead.
Exodus 12, verse 29. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt. From the firstborn of
Now,
Pharaoh.
the prisoner ones. What are you talking about? The prisoner
ones.
You mentioned about a
himself
prisoner.
and the firstborn. Yeah, from the firstborn of Pharaoh.
They were not prisoners. Those are the Pharaoh children.
You gotta wait for the whole verse to be read, and then you can object, because your objection is silly. At midnight the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well. So there's two questions you hear. What did the firstborn of the prisoner do exactly that deserved being killed? And also,
he is an Egyptian.
What did the firstborn of the livestock do? Oh, so God kills people based on ethnicity, so he's a racist motherfucker. Awesome.
Yes.
And that's...
God is the original racist.
No, he's not.
Yes, he is. He has people that he chose to be his own children, right?
People just because of their ethnicity. Are you?
No,
standing by this?
I can't. You're an atheist, so you would not.
Well, you haven't even read the Bible, apparently.
But God should.
Let me ask you a couple questions really quickly. What did God do? What did God say to create Israel? Didn't He say, hey, you guys, go kill those people and take their land?
That's later, buddy. Benjamin, though.
But that's in the Bible, right? God literally said, go kill those dudes,
I
and you can have the land.
Can you just?
I invented a word for this, Romero. It's called genocidophilia, which is the love of genocide. And
I guess you guys want to talk to yourself, but go ahead.
No, shit, don't blow us out, man.
Wow,
Honey, come on.
I asked an honest question, and I'm
Nero's talking, Benjamin is talking, so we're not even saying
I asked an honest question, and all I heard
tell
was
your
the dude crashing
atheist
out.
buddies to actually have a good discussion, not just drawing around, calling back.
Okay, well, I'm sorry you're crashing out.
I need everyone to respectfully not speak over one another. It's very easy. Please. Thanks.
Can I get a feedback from Selah, though, about God killing all these children because of their ethnicity? Like, is that cool? Is that where we're at?
Who's speaking?
It's Benjamin Selah, and I want just to confirm, you're okay with God killing children of prisoners. Well, their parents are in jail, and God kills the children because of their ethnicity. Nothing else, just their ethnicity. That's what your patriot said here.
Yeah, so
You're
like,
okay with that? What's the program?
I don't know about okay, but I think that I kind of don't necessarily get bogged down with what happens here on Earth more than the fact that all of us are going to be reconciled. Like for me, all of us are going to die at some point or the other. It could be in a car crash, it could be during a war, it could be anything. But the story about when Elijah, was it Elijah or Elisha, when he curses the children, for me, that text, what it's doing is teaching, like, I think that there's some people that they get so aligned with God, they get so close and aligned to God that even their words carry weight. And if they say something, it'll happen. And I think it was at that moment that Elijah or Elisha, I can't remember who it was, realized that, okay, my words now have weight. Like it'll get carried out. Like I don't think that when he turned and he cursed them, that he necessarily knew that it was going to be carried out. But I do believe that as a holistic, like the narrative becomes that particular people that have a walk with God need to watch their words. And if you curse a thing, it will be cursed. And if you bless a thing, it will be blessed. So it's very imperative that certain of us that have this relationship and this, I don't want to maybe say this, not hierarchy, but like, what is it in an army when you have different positions and you have
chain of command.
Not chain of command, but
hierarchy.
Authority, let's just say.
Hierarchy, Sarah, the word
authority
hierarchy.
in the spirit. You can't just walk around and and I think that Elijah or Elisha may have learned that on that day.
So you're saying is he cursed him accidentally, right?
I think that
children
I think it was on that day that he realized that he had the weight to his words, and what I think the text is conveying to us is that there's a certain place that you walk with God that you can't just curse or bless something. You have to be mindful of what you're blessing, what you're cursing, because.
And then how does that answer the question of
Those aren't really answering Benjamin's
of killing the Egyptian children?
Well, that's what I was saying is that I don't get bogged down with people losing their lives in this realm.
Right, you want to avoid actually addressing what he's saying.
No, I'm saying that it doesn't necessarily.
What do you mean you don't get bogged down with people's lives on Earth, Sailor? You're in other rooms about Palestine and freaking all the time.
And I'm a firm believer that God is going to reconcile those people.
Great. So you do believe
fine for Masha.
That's one of the reasons that we come out of the ashes praising God is that they have an understanding that despite the fact that they're being killed in this realm, that they will rise with God. They come out of the ashes praising God.
Are you saying that it was okay for Masha to be treated the way she was by the Islamic regime?
No, of course it's not okay.
Because it just doesn't matter who dies?
No, I'm not saying it doesn't matter who dies. What I'm saying is that in this realm, if you think that we're not going to have wars on Earth, then you're living in rainbows and bunnies and daisies that I don't understand.
God showing up at midnight.
No, this is God interacting in our human experience and that reality of war. Like, that's, we have wars on this Earth, and God is interacting in the framework of this world.
Well, the passage I read is not a war, right? It's this God showing up at midnight, killing children.
It is a war because they sent his people. What are you talking about?
Yeah, he's saying, let my people go.
What makes people go hungry? Rulers eating up all the money and.
I knew you didn't know the whole thing.
We're going around enslaving people. Is that the claim now? Enslaving were like you're saying Jews. Jews, as a group, are still.
The Jews were enslaved by the Egyptians. And God is responding accordingly.
You're saying Jews.
The Egyptians killed
weak.
hundreds of thousands of little kids
even
and drowned them and fed them to the crocodiles.
Even the children could enslave them. That's what you're saying. Jews are such pathetic wussies that the children of the Egyptians could enslave them. That's what God kills the children.
Maybe we should go a little over the top there. And
taking the first male sons did incredibly damage to Pharaoh's kingdom.
Well, killing children will do damage. I agree, killing children will do damage.
Well, especially when they're going to throw up your leaders and your army and whatever.
This is called collective punishment, right? What you're saying is, as long as you don't like a group of people, or like maybe some of them do a bad thing, then you can kill all of them. Like, Palestine
No, I don't
misbehave,
think so.
then
I don't
be
think so.
justified to kill all of Palestinians.
No. We cannot carry out. Listen, we cannot carry out collective punishment because we don't have the ability to make that person reanimated again after they die. Like God has the ability to reanimate them as soon as they die. I don't. God has the ability to reconcile them, put them back together, give them a new life. I don't. And since I don't have the ability to do that, I don't have the right to do that.
But God gave the right to the Israelites to kill all the Amalekites, so He could give the right to the Israelites to kill all the Palestinians, right?
I mean, you're living in a tribal time where people go to war, and so I wouldn't doubt that God would give victory at particular times to different people.
So if the Israelites succeed over the Palestinians,
Sometimes He gave the victory to people against the Israelis. I'm not the Israelis, but the Hebrew Israelites.
Right, but if the Israelis succeed against the Palestinians, you're not understanding on the front ground. That's the will of God.
No, because if you read in Micah, the exact same thing that they did in Micah is what they're doing now. I can literally read it. You build Zion in blood. You take people's houses. You take away their inheritance, and all of the things that they're doing now is exactly what is written in Micah, and they were judged for that.
Isn't that what they did to the Amalekites and Mr. Amalekites and every single tribe that occupies that area?
No, it was different because they were acting on their own will. They were being unjust in what they were doing.
I don't care about that. God kills these children who didn't do anything. The Egyptian children. Oh, just because they're their ethnicity.
Yeah, God.
But now we're talking about justice.
Take anyone's life that God wants to because God has the ability to reanimate them. I don't.
You have been spending too much time with Andrew. How's that going, by the way? You getting anywhere?
I got a question to Benjamin when we get a chat.
I think Queen Pat has been waiting to.
Yeah, let's let Queen Pat speak. Let's hear from someone. Hopefully, we get some more legitimate claims and responses.
Yeah. So I just want to give a response to Benjamin based on my understanding. Benjamin, let me clarify. You don't believe in God, right?
I do believe in God. Yeah.
You do believe in God.
Sure.
You believe in God's authority.
I don't know about that. That's a little bit problematic.
So what exactly do you believe about God?
I believe that people make up gods the way people make up money. I believe in God the same way I believe in money. I just believe that the ontology of gods are the things that people invent. Like I believe in unicorns and
So you believe
I
that
believe in
God?
Star Trek.
Okay, you believe that God is something you make up for yourself.
Yeah, God is really just a story, right? It's a story.
Because that defiles the whole idea of who God is. God is supposed to be somebody who has some sort of sovereignty, who has some sort of power, that's high above us. That's the whole concept of God. Anyways, I see where your questions and your questioning are coming from because it will never make sense to you. I understand you're just trying to argue, but this is something about God that I just want to enlighten you about. There is such a thing as God's authority, God's sovereignty, and God's justice. You cannot, from your own frame of mind, judge God.
This is QueenPat.Realty, handcrafted by God Himself, a rare blend of strength and grace.
To whom He shows mercy to, and He shows kindness to whom He wants to show kindness. And the way God administered His justice back then is quite different from the way He administers justice right now. So for you to really understand why He took the action He took back then, you have to really enter into that frame. You have to really enter into that dispensation and how God administered judgments. Whether the children of Egypt died.
Wait, was there a question? Because this just sounds like a sermon justifying killing babies.
No, I'm not justifying killing babies. I'm trying to
You're saying that there is a way of looking at killing babies
in which it makes sense. That's what you're
No,
saying.
on God's justice. And number one, I
I
said
wonder if
that
Benjamin
even
agrees
though
in the
the
right,
Philippines
a woman's right to choose and women's health care.
I mean,
I bet you Benjamin stands with abortionists,
It's
though.
not, how do you know Benjamin is just a story? How do you know?
I didn't say that I know it.
Exactly.
What I believe.
So you're just coming from blind faith and trying to acknowledge something that's, oh, it's just a story. I mean, that's the end of the day.
Well, I don't have any
What
evidence
she's
that
saying
it's
is,
anything
what she's
other
telling
than
you
just a
is,
story.
what she's telling you is, according to the scripture, God is just in what he does. Whether if you talk about killing the babies in that moment or not, right? Because at the end of the day, God is the justifier, right?
We agree.
And if you have a
We
problem
agree.
with that, then take it with God.
Is justifying baby killing.
Sure, that's fine. But you could take it with God if you wanted to, yeah.
I
She's
don't
just
think
giving you a
Venezuela
response.
is right there with her.
And I'm right there with her.
I
too.
am trying to appeal to people, all good people, not the
There is no good people. There's no good people in this sense.
all people
All is evil, and all desire what is evil against God. And that's what it is.
please.
I got a question on that. Yeah, I don't think Benjamin's question is being properly addressed. I really
Go
don't.
ahead, see if you can answer it for him. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. It just seems to me, if you stand back and look at it objectively in a chronological way, God is doing a lot of killing. He's the flood, Sodom and Gomorrah, and it seems like God is way into eugenics, even to the point that Abraham, the guy he chose, was married and breeding with his sister. That really is kind of neck down genetics. It's very selective genetics, if you ask me. Sarah was his half sister, same father, different mothers. And then when it comes to Isaac, they always want you to marry someone in our clan, in our tribe. So if you stand back, there's something in Isaiah that says, "Oh, I have chosen the perfect vine." It is very much of an allegory, a metaphor with a vineyard to produce the ideal wine. So he chooses them, and then whatever it happens that Israel and his children end up in Egypt, and there's only like I don't know, 20, 30 of them, and 400 years later, there's 4 million of them, and
David kicked me.
you have to accept that God can create humans. So what does it matter if he kills them if he can reconstitute them in another, hopefully better situation? So I think this is a very important point to accept. So eugenics is going on here. So he brings them out. He kills about half of them in the desert. He's winnowing them out. And then the killing basically stops once the kingdom is established. This mass eugenics project stops. And they say, okay, I've set it up. I've planted you into this location. You're supposed to be my nation of priests. You're supposed to be the example to the rest of humanity as to how to behave. That was the goal, but they failed, right? So I also don't believe that this God of Abraham is an omniscient or omnipotent God, because sure seems like a lot of his projects aren't working out that well, but I think it's also a process. Because their kingdom failed so miserably, he just started killing them. What's that?
Excuse me, Benjamin, this is loud, so I'd like to interrupt.
Israelites give permission to kill Amalekites. So
that's right. I'm saying he was establishing the kingdom. He was gaining the territory, which is basically what Israel is doing now with the Palestinians.
This is why I think that this religion is genocidophilia. It's really genocidophilia.
It certainly was a lot of genocide going on, a lot of killing going on in the first, 1,000 years.
To love God is to love genocide.
No, I mean, I think it's very important to look at God as a farmer. He is developing. He's farming human beings.
Yeah, but he's using genocide to do that.
Yes, absolutely.
So we
There's
should
a lot of
believe that.
killing on the farm. There's a lot
And
of
you're
killing on
engaging
the
in
farm.
genocidophilia. That's
Well,
the risk.
if I'm farming, if I take out weeds, am I engaging in some sort of genocide against some weeds?
That's not genocide. It is.
Well, in a way it is, because
herbicide. It's herbicide.
I'm being prejudicial against these particular types of plants, and because I want my corn to grow. And, I'm like, I'm not going to replant this type of corn because it's not what I'm looking for. I'm just saying, objectively.
Now is you're reducing humans to the level of.
Hi, I'm just going to interrupt and go ahead because you two will never shut up because you're morons. I just want to say that God is the all and that this room is an IQ deficit room full of low IQ stupid people talking about nothing. It's a trap. It's a web of despair set up for loser morons like Selah and all of you idiots and Jew-hating anti-Semites. They kicked me.
And if I may, Benjamin,
Yeah.
if it's okay.
Yeah.
All right, so this is gonna be a little away from this topic of like Egyptians. If it's okay, if not, then I can wait.
Fine.
All right, so here's my question to you: is that I see that you said that you think like God just like money, all right, and invented. My question is that forget about
Gods, they're all invented.
Okay, yeah, well, forget about all religions, all myths, all of that. Do you think that there is a creator, or based on probability, do you think that we were, or everything in this universe was that created, or it was not created?
It's created.
Okay, so do you think that there is a creator behind that to begin with?
Yeah.
Okay, so all right, so at least we're past that point. Okay, all right. Yeah, continue.
But you want to anthropomorphize the creator into something you're going to then call a god, and do you then want to project the god that created the universe into the god that kills Egyptian children?
So
That's the problem.
This is here's the thing. I don't want to talk about the Egyptian part because I don't believe in it. So it would be kind of like unfair for me to talking about something I don't believe. My only
It's unfair to talk about things you don't believe.
Well, or
Makes you think that.
So here's what I mean to say is that still trying to either justify or trash both of them would be kind of an unfair point from my end, right? The reason I'm actually
unfair.
Because the thing is that this is not my book to talk about. That's what I'm saying that. But that's
Wait a minute. Do you think the book talks about you?
I'm not an Egyptian or Israelite, so I don't think so.
You believe in God?
I do believe in God.
I believe in God.
Yeah.
You believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob?
Yes, I do. But that's the thing is that as a Muslim, I don't believe that those stories are correct or complete. That's what I'm saying is that that's one of the reasons I don't want to talk about.
Right. Your position is that it's a game of telephone and it's been translated over and over again, shared, written down, lost.
It's a little more
And
than that.
it's just at the end of the day, it's just a book, right?
My question is that okay, anthropomorphically, yeah, sure. I don't personally believe that God has, he's like a human being. All right. But that's my question to you is that if you don't believe that, then any kind of questions, like right now you're like, oh, God killed Egyptians, right? You're more worried about that, and rightly so, because you're a human being. You're worried about.
Let me be very clear. I am worried about something I call genocidophilia, which is the love of genocide. And people express the love of genocide by expressing their admiration for the God of the Bible.
Completely understand, but that's my thing is that. But that's
whether the God is real or not. What bothers me is the genocidophilia is real.
I completely get your point, but my point here is that right now, whatever you're feeling about it, or whatever you're concerned about it, or whatever you're hating, you're technically making God into a human being as well. Because before
No. Let me
Before that, all right, God killed vegetations. God killed a lot of animals, all the cattle. That happened as well, all right. And you don't
So you did
What's
ask.
up with
Okay.
killing the firstborn animal? Explain just a
Yeah,
little
okay,
bit.
my apologies, I think I missed that part, okay. So, at least you did cover, but even if we do ignore this, or if you, not say ignore, but just put this entire story on the side for a second. The point is that even for living right now, right, you have to survive by killing something. Even if you become a vegan, you're still taking some sort of life. That's a different thing than whether they feel pain or not. Okay, they don't feel pain, but still, you are taking life. Right now, this entire world, it is, structured by God, where one thing
What the
is
fuck is this guy even saying? What's your point? What kind of point are you trying to make?
You guys have been talking for a while. I'm just trying to.
You've just been rambling on. I'm just saying, what's the point of this?
So my point here is that even the so-called mercy or ethics that you're actually you're just creating a human-like species and expecting that to act like human. That's the point where we're trying to make right now.
Many people take a theistic view of God, where they think God is an actual agent that is involved in our actions, that he has maximal aspects of morality, and that he's a thinking agent. And so when you say anthropomorphize God, I mean, maybe you just have a pantheistic view or a deistic
How's
view.
that deistic, or how is that deistic to begin with? I mean,
Well, if it's deistic, you're just saying that God just started the world and just stepped back and he's not involved in anything.
I did not even say that for even 1 minute, but okay.
I'm just saying that many people who are religious do take a theistic view, and it sounds
That's
like
why I specifically asked Benjamin.
Benjamin is just doing an internal critique of that view. If you have a different view on that,
and
he's
that's
not having that.
perfectly fine. I mean, Jason, come on, man. It's kind of like I've been listening to you guys for a while as well. I mean, if you don't want to listen, opposite side, no problem. But my point here is that I've been trying to first even set the parameters to begin with. Because let's just say if someone comes to you and say that, okay, I am God, what are your parameters to judge whether that person is God or not?
I don't know what that question means. If somebody comes to me and say, I am God, what are the parameters that I would do to assess whether that entity is God? I think it's a nonsensical question. I mean, it just depends on what your definition of God is.
That's my question. Is that what is yours to begin with? That's exactly what.
Look, I'm an atheist. I don't think that any God or gods exist. So my view is that, any God, the traditional view of a God who is an entity that created the universe, that is a thinking agent, that is a theistic view of the world, that has morals, and that thinks that God does, all powerful, all knowing, all loving. He doesn't make mistakes. Everything that God does is good. That's my view of God.
So that's my question. So if someone comes to you, is there going to be any parameter that you're going to be able, all right, prove that you're all loving, or prove you're doing? Is there any parameter that you satisfy, and you be like, all right, yeah, I believe that you're a God?
They can just make an argument. I mean, there's arguments that you can make to justify the existence of God. But if you're asking, if somebody comes to me and I'm like, what kind of proof are they going to provide that they are a God? I just think it's kind of nonsensical. I don't even understand the question.
So my point, okay, I'll answer that question. I can.
Yeah, I don't.
Because here's the reason I'm saying is that, look, if you are an atheist, right, you don't believe in God, all right? So there needs to be either you're 100% convinced that, okay, I tried to look for these parameters, and these parameters were not satisfied, therefore there is no God, all right? That's how and that's my question. If that person comes in, is there any particular parameters in your mind that, okay, if you satisfy these parameters, I will believe in you to be God? And if there's no parameters, then maybe you need to think about them.
Yeah, it's fine. Nobody else.
Yeah.
This is like lowbrow.
Yeah, super lowbrow. Arzlan, were you convinced that God exists somehow?
I'm convinced that God exists.
By what?
So based on the fact that we all are created. That's
okay. Now you're begging the question right out of the gate.
Okay. So can you repeat that?
Yeah, you're begging the question. You said the reason you were convinced that God exists is because we are created.
Say that.
Okay.
So asking like, okay, if someone comes to me and say, oh, okay, actually, you know what? If someone comes to me and say that I'm God, no matter what tricks he plays, no matter what he creates.
No one said that. No one said any of this shit. You're just making shit up out of it.
Just so you were asking me this.
Yeah, I asked you a simple question. What convinced you God exists? And right away you begged the question. You say, well, everything was created. That's evidence. Yeah.
Yeah,
That just means that you're saying that you think things are created by God, and that's what convinced you. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just dumb. That's a little
Okay, so then that's the question I was earlier asking. What are the parameters that I should?
Anything.
Okay, what like
anything that God wants to do to convince me? Because you're convinced by stuff that seems to be pretty low bar. Why don't you just admit that you want to believe in God, therefore you do? That's basically
actually, even from a probability perspective, it makes more sense that there's a creator than there's not a creator.
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so you're saying that anywhere.
Well, just give us the evidence.
So, okay, that's what I'm saying. Then there's a simple evidence is that you need to bring anything that has been created by itself or it didn't exist and started existing. So
we're asking you for evidence. We're asking you for evidence, and then you just turn it around.
I'm telling you.
I'm asking. You say you believe in God.
I'm telling you evidence. I'm telling you about evidence, right?
What's the evidence? What's the evidence?
I'm telling you the evidence, all right? Everything I observe around the world.
Look at the trees.
What was that?
Look at the trees.
Okay.
That's essentially the evidence.
No, I'm not even going there. I'm not even going there at this point. I'm not even going there at that point.
But what's wrong with that?
Okay, you can go there, no problem. Like, I mean, if you look at the trees, if that turns you. But here's my thing, though. Anything.
I'm asking Jason, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, okay, so look at the trees is the evidence that God exists. I mean, we have better evidence to suggest as to why trees have come into being than to say that a God with a mind with no that is all powerful and all loving actually created it. That is less parsimonious than to say like the processes of nature created the trees.
So who creates those processes? I mean, again, you're still putting God into.
Go ahead, Arsenal.
Okay, just one thing, all right? Here's this thing, Jason. We are not denying those processes, all right? But the point here is that even if you look at all of those processes, you don't even have to go trees. My only question is that if there's something called matter, all right? How did that came into existence?
Yeah, I can say I don't know. I can say I don't know.
I mean,
that doesn't mean that God exists. It could be something that what is more reasonable is to say something that conforms to the laws of physics and how we know that like the things that we know how the world operates. That would be more reasonable than to say, oh, I'm just going to pontificate and say, oh, it's got to be this like God that is all powerful, has these like maximal properties. That's what created the universe. You're making a big leap in logic.
No, actually, here's this thing. This is my point.
Wouldn't you be making a big leap as well to say that?
What leap am I making?
That you don't know? Like what?
I'd like to say something after this if the mod.
Please do.
I'd rather hear what Piper's got to say. Yeah, go ahead, Piper.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, this is
I agree. I mean, Jason, I don't know why you.
Can you just stop? Let Piper.
Go ahead, Piper. Yeah, Jason, I think.
All right, thank you. So the issue here is like, okay, so you're saying, all right, well, I believe in God because God is an explanation for the existence of the natural world, right? Whatever, like just the natural world, simpliciter, right? And what Jason is saying is, okay, well, I'm not, convinced that the natural world needs some sort of external explanation, right? So the only way that you're going to be able to motivate the conclusion that you have is if you tell us why the natural world needs some sort of external explanation for its existence. Because external explanation is going to bottom out for you as well, since you don't think God has an external explanation.
Yeah, but that would be to the personal level, though, to the individual. Right now, if Jason is taking more of the side that he actually wants to know, then that would be a different thing to go farther and explain that. That's why I think Arsalan is asking, like, what is this something that will convince you if you really desire to know, right? So,
if you say that I don't know, and that's the simplest way I could take without having to give credit to a creator, that's fine, Jason. But you cannot discredit Arsenal or me or any theist to believe that there's a creator, right? That's all I'm saying, Jason. I'm not saying that your belief is false. But you can't discredit just because you said I don't know.
Well, I mean, look, you have some claim that you think that it is more reasonable that God is the reason or creation for what we see, as opposed to me saying I think there's a naturalistic explanation, and just because I cannot provide all the details of that doesn't mean that my position is less reasonable than yours. So I'm just waiting for whatever evidence that you have that you think it's more reasonable parsimonious that God is the explanation as opposed to naturalistic processes. So give the evidence or reason.
The only thing that that you're saying is the naturalistic way is that the only way that you can explain is something that you see, right? And that the theists are saying, right, something that's outside of the unseen world, right, the unseen thing. And you're saying is, well, we're saying is, hey, because of there's so many things that are unseen outside of the natural world, we believe that God is the cause of all this. But then you're saying is, right, I don't know, and that's the simple way of I can take it as. And that's
because of so many things, what you say, because of so many things that we know exist outside of the natural world, what things do we know that are outside
the natural and the unnatural world?
The supernatural.
Supernatural, sure, but
give me an example of something supernatural.
You would even agree.
Look, just give me an example. Dude, just give me an example of something supernatural.
Is there things?
Why are you giving the question? Why are you asking the question?
Do you know all things?
Why are you asking the question? No.
Exactly. So you're limited in your knowledge, right?
Sure.
So therefore,
look, I answered your question.
That doesn't.
Look, dude, I answered your question. You talked about something supernatural. Give me an example of something supernatural.
I mean, I'm a Christian, so I would say like the scripture presents like angel, right? And the things also God Himself is a supernatural being.
Yeah. What evidence do you have that angels exist?
If I have evidence, right? If I can explain to you with my simple like explanation, then it wouldn't be a supernatural thing.
Okay, so it's just
the reason that we're saying
like a God of the gaps.
It's super. That's what I'm saying, right? You don't know a lot of things. You're limited in your knowledge, but you can simply say God doesn't exist. I think that's very contradiction. Like it's a very.
It's very contradiction.
It's a contradictory word, like to say that, right?
What's contradictory?
To say you know that you don't know everything, but you know something. That's literally what you're saying.
Wait a minute, maybe I should be clear. Like, my view is that I don't accept or believe in the proposition that God exists. That means that I don't believe that God exists. That's my view. It's a belief. I don't believe that God exists. I think that all the evidence that I see around me points to the fact that God does not exist. That doesn't mean that God, I guess God could exist. It's not impossible, but I don't believe that God does exist. I think that the evidence points all towards there not being a God existing. You think, but on the other hand, wait a second. You don't say, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll bet that your position is not that you believe that God exists, but it's possible that God does not exist. You believe with 100% certainty that God exists. Am I correct?
Correct.
Oh, okay. So you believe with 100% certainty that God exists, and I say I don't believe that God exists, but I am open to exploring whatever options. Even you have to present, first of all, like for supernatural entities, you have to present a methodology that would allow me to evaluate whether something is supernatural or not. But it sounds like you have the unreasonable position because you are accepting something with 100% certainty. You're able to even look at any of your options. And
you're one of the atheists.
That is a fanatical view. That is a fanatical view.
You are one of the atheists that would actually say the possibility for God to exist, but a lot of atheists would say that God does not exist at all, right? But with your understanding, listen, with your
most atheists take this kind of view.
Not that yes, they.
Well, you can have other atheists here. you
But,
can ask Andreas here.
honey, would you believe the possibility God
I support Jason, what Jason said. I agree with Jason.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So,
Well, you're not an atheist.
just hang on. No, I'm not. I am a theist, but here's the big disconnect here. People assuming that God is omniscient and omnipotent and created the universe. People say that, well, you've obviously not read the Bible objectively because the universe is not even mentioned once. Unicorn is mentioned 9 times in the Bible. Universe, not once. It never says that God created the universe. Not that I'm a fan. Nor, how in the world would you think God is omniscient and omnipotent when he says, yeah, I regret making humans and now I'm going to kill them, most all of them off. Or, now I'm going to have to nuke Sodom and Gomorrah. No, he's working with these imperfect creatures in a process that he's trying to perfect into becoming noble so they take care of his creation. It's that simple.
So, are you saying he didn't create the universe? I'm confused.
No. Will you show me in the Bible where God created?
Okay, Michael, Fred, you want to come up and say anything? Because you may not like what you're about to hear. But I'm going to read from the Book of Wisdom or Folly and contrast what I'm about to read with what you just listened to. I'm creating YouTube videos, by the way. Okay, this is called Uncertain Arts Magic. De Quibusdam Artibus Magicis. Now of those operations of magic by which thou seekest to display unto some other person the righteousness of thy will, I make haste to instruct thee. First, if thou have a reasonable link with him by word or letter, it is most natural simply to create in thyself as I have taught a child or bud will, and let that radiate from thee through the channel aforesaid. But if thou have no links, the case is otherwise, and is not easy. Here thou mayst make communication through others, as it were by relays, or thou mayst act directly upon his aura, by magical means such as the projection of thy synlaika. But unless he be sensitive and well attuned, thou mayst fare but ill. Yet even in this case thou mayst attain much skill by practice with intelligence. In the end it is better altogether to work wholly within thine own universe, slowly and with firm steps advancing from the center, and dealing one by one with those unharmonized parts of the not-self, which lie close to thee and impinge upon thee. This therefore closeth the circle of my speech. For now I am returned to that which I spake aforetime concerning the general method of love, and thy development by that way. On the great work de magno opere. But now give ear most eagerly, thou son of my loins, for I will now discourse unto thee of thine own attainment, without which all is but idleness. Know first that conscious thought is but phenomenal, the noise of thy machine. Now chemistry or alchemy meaneth the Egyptian science, and the true magic of Egypt hath this for its foundation. We have in our house many substances which act direct upon the blood, many practices of virtue similar to simulate, compose, purify, analyze, direct, or concentrate the thought. Confer the book of the law, chapter 2, verse 22, but this action is subtle and of many modes, and dependeth heavily on the conditions of the experiment, whereof the first is thine own will therein. Therefore I say unto thee that this is thy work, immediate and necessary, to discover openly thy will unto thyself, and to fortify and enkindle it by all one pointedness of thought and action, so that thou mayst direct it in words unto its core, that it is thyself is thy name had it, for thereby is thy will made white with heat, so that no dross may cling to it. That this work is the great work, and standeth alone on the steps to the great work, de gradibus ad magnum opus. This great work is the attainment of the knowledge and conversation of thine holy guardian angel. In the eighth ether is the way that I've revealed. But I say, prepare thyself most heartily and well for that battle of love by all means of magic. Make thyself puissant, wise, radiant in every system, and balance thyself well in thine universe. Then with a pure will tempered in the thousand furnaces of thy trials, burn up thyself within thyself. In the preparation thou shalt have learned how thou mayst still all thoughts, and reach ecstasy of trance in many modes. But in these marriages thy conscious self is bridegroom, and the not self bride, while in this great work thou givest up that conscious self as bride to thy true self. This operation is then radically alien from all others, and it is hard, because it is a total reversal of the current of the will and the transmutation of its formula and nature. Here, O my son, is the one secret of success in this great work. Invoke often on the formula of the moon, de formula lunae. Thus then concerning operations of the Tao with the Yang and the Yin, is there enough? For thine own art of beauty shall divine for thee, and devise new heavens. But in all these is the formula of the serpent with the head of the lion, and all this magic is wrought by the radiance and creative force thereof. And this force leapeth continually from plane to plane, and break forth from his bonds, so that constraint is labor. Now then learn that the yin is also a formula of force, and the nature of the yin is to be still and to encircle or limit, and it is a mirror reflecting diverse images without change in its own kind. So then it seeketh never to overleap the barriers of its plane. For this reason it is well to use it in operations of a very definite and restricted type. But although it be inert, yet is it most subject to change, for its number is fourscore and one, which is of the moon. And these are Alim, Alim, the gods elemental before H, descending in the midst, made them creative. So then thou mayest use constantly this formula to rearrange things in their own planes, and this is a most pragmatic consideration. Pragmatic is spelled with a tick at the end, T-I-C-K, like magic. Pragmatic. Der Killer Sumenda, on the consuming eagle. Take in this work, the eagle all undefiled and virginal for thy sacrament. And thy technique is the magic of water, so that thine act is of nourishment and not of generation. Therefore the prime use of this art is to build up thine own nature. But if thou hast skill to control the mood of the eagle, then mayst thou work many an admirable effect upon thine environment. Thou knowest how great is the fame of witch women, old and without man, to cause events, although they create nothing. It is this straightness of the channel which giveth force to the stream. Beware, O my son, lest thou cling overmuch to this mode of magic, for it is lesser than that other, and if thou neglect that other, then is thy danger fearful and imminent, for it is the edge of the abyss of Coronzon, where are the lonely towers of the Black Brothers, also the formulation of the object in the eagle, is by a species of intoxication, so that his nature is a dream or delirium, and thus there may be illusion. For this cause I deem it not wholly unwise if thou use this way of magic chiefly as a cordial, that is for the fortifying of thine own nature, and chemical agents according to the four elements. De medicinis secundum quatuor elementa, concerning the use of chemical agents, and be mindful that thou abuse them not, learn that the sacrament itself relateth to spirit, and the four elements balance thereunder in its perfection. See also thy lion himself hath a fourfold menstruum for his serpents. Now to fire belong cocaine, which fortifieth the will, loosening him from bodily fatigue; morphine, which purifieth the mind, making the thought safe and slow and single; heroin, which partaketh, as it seemeth, of the nature of these twain aforesaid, albeit in degree less notable than either of them; and alcohol, which is food, that is fuel for the whole man. To water attribute hashish and mescal, for they make images, and they open the hidden springs of pleasure and of beauty. Morphine, for its ease, hath also a part in water, ere ruleth ethyl oxide, for it is a sword, dividing asunder every part of thee, making easy the way of analysis, so that thou comest to learn thyself of what elements thou art compact. Lastly, of the nature of earth are the direct hypnotics, which operate by repose, and restore thy strength by laying thee as a child in the arms of the great mother, I say rather of her material and physiological vice-regent. That's on chemical agents according to the four elements. This is on the virtue of experience in this art. De virtute experientiae in hac arte. Not sleep, not rest, not peace, not contentment are the will of the hero, but these things he hateth, and consenteth to enjoy them only with shame of his weak nature. But he will analyze himself without pity, and he will do all things soever that may free and fortify his mind and will. Know that the technique of the right use of these magic poisons is subtle, and since the nature of every man differeth from that of his fellow, there entereth idiosyncrasy, and thine experience shall be thy master in this art. Heed also this word: following the right use of these agents is to gain a knowledge preliminary of thine own powers and of high state, so that thou goest not altogether blindly and without aim in thy quest, ignorant of the keys to thine own inner being. Also thou must work alway for a definite end, never for pleasure or for relaxation, except thou wilt as a good knight is sworn to do, and thou being hero and magician art in peril of abusing the fiery agents only, not those of earth, air, or water, because these do really work with thee in purity, making thee wholly what thou wouldst be, an engine indefatigable, a mind clear, calm, and concentrated, and a heart fierce aglow. On the true sacrament de sacramento vero. But in the sacrament of the gnosis, which is of the spirit, is there not hurtful, for its elements are not only food, but a true incarnation and quintessence of life, love, and liberty. And at its manifestation thy lion is consecrated by pure light of ecstasy. Also, as this is the strongest, so also it is the most sensitive of all things soever, and both proper and ready to take impressive will, not as a seal passively, but with true recreation in a microcosm thereof. And this is a God alive and puissant to create, and he is a word of magic, wherein thou mayst read thyself with all thine history and all thy possibility. Also as to thine eagle, is not this chosen by nature herself by her way of attraction, without which harmony, aesthetic and magnetic, thy lion is silent and inert, even as Achilles before his rage in his tent. Now also, therefore, I charge thee, O my son, to partake constantly of the sacrament, for it is proper to all virtue, and as thou dost learn to use it in perfection, thou wilt surpass all other modes of magic. Yea, in good sooth, no herb or potion is like unto this supreme in every case, for it is the true stone of the philosophers, and the elixir and medicine of all things, the universal tincture or menstruum of thine own will. And directing disciples, de discipulis regendis. I will have thee to know moreover, my dear son, the right art of conduct with them whom I shall give thee for initiation, and the rule thereof is one rule. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. See thou constantly to it that this be not broken, especially in the section thereof. I dare say so, which readeth mind thine own business. This is of application equally to all, and the most dangerous man or woman as hath occurred, or I err, is the busybody. Oh, how ashamed are we, and moved to indignation, seeing the sins and follies of our neighbors. Of all the occasions of this grievance, the most common is the desire of sex unsatisfied. And thou knowest already, even in thy young experience, how in that delirium the wheel of the whole universe appeareth of no account. Do thou then wean thy babes from that simplicity, and instil the sense of true proportion. For verily this is a way of madness, love, unless it be under will. And the cure of this madness is not so good as its prevention, so that thou shouldst be beforehand with these children, showing them the right importance of love, how it should be a sacred right, exalted above personality, and a fire to enlighten and serve man, not to devour him. And certain diseases of disciples. De quibus dam morbis discipulorum. And thus, if any babe of thine be ill at ease, look closely first whether this love be not the root of his distemper. Watch also idleness. For whoso presseth eagerly forward in will, heedeth little the affairs of his fellows. O my son, if every man doth his own will, there is no more to say. But the busybody nor mindeth his own business, nor leaveth others to mind theirs. Be thou instant therefore with such an one to cure him by enlightening his will, spending and speeding him therein. Remember also that if one speak ill of another, the fault is first of all in himself. For we know not but that which is within us. Did not the great witch-finder end by confessing that he also was a sorcerer? We become that which obsesseth us, either through extreme hate or extreme love. Knowest thou not how the one is a symbol of the other? For this reason, since love is the formula of life, we are under bond to assimilate in the end that which we fear or hate. So then we shall be wise to mold all things within ourselves in quietness and modulation. But above all, must we use all to our own end, adapting with adroitness even our weakness to the work, and watching for faults in the house. De culpis domi pretendis, therefore, watch heedfully the fault of another, that thou mayst correct it in thyself. For if it were not in thee, thou couldst not perceive it or understand it. Lo, in thine ecstasy of love thou callest upon the universe to bear witness that to this end alone was it created. It is unthinkable that thou shouldst love another, and incomprehensible that any man should grieve. Yet ere the moon change her quarter, thou art free of thy lunes, and lovest another, and it may be grievest in thyself, while he that amazed thee hath joined the company of the rejoicing. Watch then, and heed thyself, and pay no heed to thy fellows, in so far as they impede thee not. And let this be the rule, for every will is pure, and every orbit free, but error bringeth confusion. See therefore that none leave his path, lest he foul that of his brother. And remember also that with speed cometh ease of control. Let each man therefore urge briskly his chariot in a right line toward the center, for two radii cannot cross. And beware most of this love, because it lieth so close to will, that disease thereof easily impereth his error to the whole way of the magician. On the body that is the shadow of man, de corpore umbra homini. Concerning the aeon, O my son, learn that the sun and his vice-regent are in all aeons of necessity, father, center, creator, each in his sphere of operation. But the formula of the past aeon was of the dying god and was based upon ignorance. For men thought that the sun died and was reborn alike in the day and in the year, and so also was the mystery of man. Now already are we well assured by science how the death of the sun is in truth but the shifting of a shadow. And in this aeon, O my son, I lift up my voice and I make prophecy. So shall it be proven as to death, for the body of man is but his shadow. It cometh and goeth even as the tides of ocean, and he only is in darkness, who is hidden by that shadow from the light of his true self. Now therefore understand thou the formula of Horus, the lion god, the child crowned and conquering, that cometh forth in force and fire. For thy changes are not phases of thee, but of the phantoms which thou mistakest for thyself.
Could you be convinced otherwise?
I doubt it, actually. I mean, I was basically atheistic before then. My parents were not particularly religious. I was not raised with any knowledge of any particular religion.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, I don't know your personal experience, but if like you had a near-death experience and like you like a lot of people like were deaf or near death, like no vital signs, and they report that they had some type of experience, and then they were revived, and that led them to believe in a god. Is that something similar, like with you? Like you had a near-death experience, and something like that. Now you believe in a god or something like that. Is that right?
That is correct. The experience I had, they put me in a medical coma. And, I'm not entirely sure that I'm right, that it wasn't just my brain chemicals. I'm not trying to convince people that that is evidence for them. But I also found that my experience differed from what is traditionally reported. I mean, there was no blinding white light. There's no, angels singing, none of that. It was more how I felt, peaceful and protected and warm and like I was where I belonged. I don't know. I'm probably getting too sappy right now, but the fact that my experience was different from what has been previously reported is part of what helps convince me personally.
I mean, look, I I've said this before to other people, like, if somebody wants to say I believe in God, but I don't claim to have any rational reasoning or any reasoning around that, I just feel this way, and I'm not trying to justify my opinion. This is just how I feel, and if you want to call me irrational, that's fine, but that's what I think. That's more, I think, intellectually honest than saying, oh, these are the reasons, and I think I can show that God exists, and I have evidence for this. I think that's a bunch of bullshit. But if you just want to say you have that experience and you believe it, and it's not, maybe it's irrational, maybe it's not, whatever, but that's what you think, and you're not here to prove anything.
Now we're right back to Sarah's problem, which is she had this emotional experience, say, of intelligence.
Yeah.
And she is now telling us that she had an experience with the God of the Bible that killed Egyptian children.
Look, as long as she's not trying to make claims that her position is rational. If she's just trying to say, well, then that's different.
I don't know that matters.
Actually, I don't necessarily see it as rational. If you guys want to think of me having an imaginary friend,
described in the Bible. Is that what we're to understand from this?
No, it was not.
Another God.
Maybe she doesn't know. He's asking if it was the Christian God or some other God. I think that's what he's asking.
Oh, actually, I don't remember thinking it was any one name we've given.
So there are 10,000 gods that people have made up. Have you identified which of them have gods and which of the 9,000 remainder are not?
I have not.
All you're leaving me with is I had this warm fuzzy.
I know. Like I said, I don't expect you to
I had a warm
believe
fuzzy
me.
too.
Yeah, and I don't think she's expecting you to believe it.
Warm fuzzies.
Yeah, Ben, she's fine. She had an experience. It's her own personal experience. Let's just leave it alone. That's great. At least she admits it.
Absolutely. I had an experience too that I really enjoyed.
Where
I did that too this afternoon.
So unpreached left.
Very good.
Is there nobody here that's actually like a Bible-believing Christian? I'm surprised. Okay.
Then you get all scared. It's funny how it's like the most confident thing they have.
Christian. I think Christ died and was resurrected and all these different things. Yeah, I believe that.
So I want to ask you, do you think that God is perfectly just? He always gives people what they deserve. He delivers justice.
So it's like making an argument. So that's my questions.
Okay, you want an argument? All right, here's the argument. If God exists, he always gives somebody what they deserve. He's perfectly just. He does not always give somebody what they deserve because sometimes he gives grace. And grace is called undeserved favor. Conclusion, God does not exist. There's the argument. That's your response. That's a good deal.
I just don't get
Jason, can you just grab something before you insist? That's actually how I'm taking this.
I don't understand that because I deserve something before I exist.
Like the way that I would understand it is like I earn things on the basis of my actions, and sometimes they're punishment, sometimes they're benefits.
You're just saying, like, is it possible, given the fact that I haven't earned anything or done something to deserve punishment? How can I do that? That doesn't exist. So how can I deserve something that doesn't exist?
Yeah, for me, like, it's an incoherent thinking. So I'm just trying to get clear if that's the way that you understood it.
But I don't know how it would be relevant in the context of that God dispels justice and he always gives. My option is
I'll get there if we can just get past this part.
Okay, let's just say that, like, Well, I just think the question is incoherent to say that somebody that does not exist, do they get something that can they be deserving of something? Yes or no, because you don't exist.
Okay, there you go.
What's it called again?
Yeah, and then I'm trying to think for any of my colleagues might respond. They're committed to this idea that God, some of his actions occur with no other people.
Or like God may have engaged in actions when there was nothing.
Right.
Because God is eternal, okay? Right.
And are those actions are they giving someone what they deserve?
Well, I mean, I guess because if you require something to exist in order for there to be, justness or justice, in that it is deserved, then I guess no. But can you exhibit justice to things that do not are not living? I don't know. Is it
there's
just
two
to create
sides to every
the
argument,
universe?
so everyone's
I don't know. I don't know
I
how.
was drawn apart once and I was like, oh fuck, no matter what you do, you're always gonna end up being
I don't know if it's an equivocation, but sometimes people will use just and justice to mean kind of different things. One is more aligned with virtuous, whereas justice specifically is about
That's the way you. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know, our justice system, justice can be, not being punished, but being freed, or having, so I don't know if it's necessarily always connected with punishment. I understand the concept that
there's two sides.
that it may not have a connection with punishment. So I get that.
There's two sides to
I don't
every
know
argument.
how I can look at it. So P2, Sully says P2, we push back on that God does not always give somebody what they deserve. So why would you push back on that, Sully? Because if God dispels grace, which is unmerited favor, then it would seem that he is sometimes giving somebody something that they do not deserve.
It's just weird to say that that's true.
Well, it's an internal critique. I mean, we're critiquing, we're looking at the kind of. What was that?
It's not an internal critique. It's just saying it concludes God doesn't exist. So I'm just saying the conclusion in P2 might be inconsistent. They might want to do it in terms of a hypothetical.
It's showing the contradiction in these two views, which are inherent to the Christian worldview.
Yeah, but you want to use this as an argument to bolster your position, though, right?
Correct. I'm showing.
Yeah, and if you think that the argument's not sound, it's not going to, for you, show that God doesn't exist.
Well, it's okay. So maybe to say it as a formal argument in terms of validity and soundness, maybe it's just showing a contradiction in two positions that results in showing the contradicted nature of the Christian God. So I don't know if you would consider that a formal syllogism or what, but it's just showing.
You can do it in terms of a hypothetical, but can you then sash it up?
Oh yeah, of course. Sorry.
It can definitely be tweaked just kind of nitpicking them.
Okay.
I mean, I would still say that even if you do it in the form of a hypothetical, I would think it's false. I think most people should think it's false, even if you're any kind of theist. It's very strange to think of entities only ever doing things when they're deserved, or sorry, not when they're deserved, only when they're deserved, rather than when there's something to be deserved, you give them that.
And by the way, you guys know this is Tom's argument. I'm running Tom's argument, so this is his so-called logic, what he calls the logical problem of grace.
I think Tom should talk to me about this argument.
Oh, fuck.
Why are you acting like that, Jason?
I don't know if Tom wants to talk to you, but
Why is that?
Because he
probably considers you a contrarian. So.
I see. I felt like, we had a conversation recently. I thought something like this might have something.
Well, in that instance, I think it was because it was like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Andrew was like invoking the bodyguard, and he wanted to talk to Andrew, and Andrew was like, Sasha, why don't you talk, Sasha? Let me lick your brain, Sasha. Like, you know.
Actually, Andrew didn't ask me. I just inserted myself. I thought it was a good argument.
I think also, like, there's times when you are, you're arguing for argument's sake. Like, you may not support the argument, but you're just pushing back on that, which might be one of the reasons why. But we all do that. I do that too.
But I don't know, like, I mean, isn't that you're supposed to do when you're figuring out what's true? You're supposed to try to see, like, oh, here's this argument against this position. And, like, how could a one in this position respond? I think that's, like, a useful thing.
Well, I think that's fine. The other one is, like, depending on devil's advocate, like, I'm going to, which may be fine to, like, support or argue for a position that you don't hold.
Yeah, but also, like, I'm not committed to any small arguments against theism being good arguments. I mean, that's something my commitment is theism is false. So, I'm not even, like, going against my actual views on criticizing some particular argument against theism.
I thought it was...
In this case, I thought the argument was just bad.
Isn't the, I can't even remember, was this the fallibilist discussion? Like, necessary? Okay,
I wasn't perfect.
Yeah, I thought so.
I think the argument is also not good, but there's a way of framing it in a very similar light, something that I would agree with. And I think it's getting to what the argument wants to show me.
Okay, everybody, this has been another exciting episode of Low IQ Dumb People wasting time talking about absolutely nothing. Hope you guys have a great day and enjoy the podcast. Take care, Fred. Take care, Michael. Farewell.
How you doing, Miss? Miss Lester, right? The golf hustler, the pig from Beverly Hills. If I'm wrong, please correct me, because I never knew you'd be an Iceman. But if you are, you know what? Here, take mine too. But take it. She already have hers. She's my wife. Look at me. You know that thing. You know she's my wife. Hey, look at me. I know that. You know that. If you ever come back again, ever, to take her money, next time bring a pistol. That way you got a chance. Be a man, don't be a fucking pimp. Now you wanna do me a favor? Get out of here. I wanna be alone with my wife. Get the fuck up and get out of here. Come here, I wanna show you.